Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sustainable Futures Symposium, Advancing a Caribbean Space Agenda, hosted by the University of Technology Jamaica in partnership with the Caribbean Futures Forum. My name is Michelle Beckford, and I'm honored to serve as your Master of Ceremonies for this significant event. Let me acknowledge guests online. Dr. Kevin Brown, our host and president of the University of Technology Jamaica. Our keynote speaker and symposium co-convener, Dr. Claire A. Nelson, founder and chief visionary officer of the Futures Forum. Professor Charmaine Barrett, acting deputy president and provost, University of Technology Jamaica. Dr. Kirkland Rowe, senior lecturer, School of Engineering in the Faculty of Engineering and Computing, UTech Jamaica, and our very hardworking chairman of the symposium's planning committee. Esteemed symposium speakers, Mr. Kishan Kodey, resident representative, United Nations Development Program, Multi-Country Office in Jamaica. Dr. Paloma Mohamed Martin, Vice Chancellor, University of Guyana. Other distinguished panelists and presenters, symposium participants joining us from around the world, students, members of the press, I extend a warm welcome to everyone. Today, we have gathered to engage in a dialogue that is both timely and critical, especially as we celebrate United Nations World Environment Day. This symposium provides a platform for us to explore how our region can leverage space technologies to tackle pressing development challenges and advance the sustainable development goals. Please note that the link to the running order of the program is posted in the chat. And at this time, it is my pleasure to welcome our president and host, Dr. Kevin Brown, to bring the official welcome. Dr. Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Beckford. Can I just do a mic check just to ensure that everyone can hear me? Can I just have a confirmation that my audio is good?
Yes, Dr. Brown, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Beckford. Let me just start by welcoming everyone to this inaugural forum on sustainable futures and advancing space technology in the Caribbean. It is certainly a milestone for us, and I want to acknowledge everyone that's been involved in getting us to this point. Let me also acknowledge representatives of ministries, departments, and agencies. We also have with us Professor Charmaine Barrett, our acting deputy president and provost, members of faculty and staff at UTech Jamaica and other tertiary institutions and educational institutions across Jamaica. Let me express a special welcome to our keynote speaker and symposium co-convener, Dr. Claire Nelson, founder and chief ideation leader of the Futures Forum. And I also want to acknowledge and thank Dr. Kirkland Rowe, senior lecturer in the School of Engineering, in the Faculty of Engineering and Computing here at UTech, who has also been the chair of the symposium planning team from our side. Thank you, Dr. Rowe, for your tremendous efforts working with Professor Therese Chambers and other members of the team, including our communications and marketing team, to ensure that we have this event today. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Kishan Kodey, resident representative, UN Development Program, and I'm really happy to have with us Dr. Paloma Mohamed Martin, Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana. Other distinguished panel of experts and international experts. I see on the video there we have Rudy Page, a good friend, and some of you may know that I resided in the UK for 23 years, and Rudy's also still in the UK. I've left Rudy behind, but still it's good to see you, Rudy, and looking forward to your participation in today's event. And so let me just also acknowledge our students who have joined us and other participants wherever you're from across the Caribbean and internationally. So it's certainly my honor to welcome you to the Sustainable Future Symposium 2025, Advancing a Caribbean Space Agenda. And this event is hosted by the University of Technology, Jamaica, or UTech, working closely with Dr. Claire Nels and her team from the Futures Forum. And so today's symposium is really timely as it coincides with the global observance of the United Nations World Environment Day. It offers us a unique moment to not only reflect on the urgent environmental challenges facing our planet, but also on the extraordinary possibilities that lie ahead in terms of using space as a platform for resolving some of these challenges. And for many of you who live in the Caribbean, certainly in Jamaica, you can see already the impact of climate change. Certainly temperatures have risen here. Jamaica is definitely hotter than it was before, certainly when I was a child. And there are other challenges around increasing hurricane activity and the intensity of said hurricanes. And so these developments present a threat to food security, for example, and many other issues ahead. And so when Dr. Claire Nelson first approached me with the idea of collaborating on hosting this symposium, it was certainly an easy decision for us at the university to embrace this opportunity to bring people together for this important discussion. Our university is keen on leading research and understanding the collective roles we in the Caribbean must play to ensure that we are not merely bystanders in the global space economy, but active architects of the future. And I wanted to emphasize that point that, you know, for far too long and in too many technical areas, the Caribbean seems to be a consumer of innovation, a consumer of knowledge. And I think that we now need to flip the script, so to speak. We have the brain power, right? That is without doubt. And we should not be just mere consumers or bystanders. We should be contributing to the body of knowledge around space technology. It is not beyond us. And as you can see, many countries, you know, who have previously not been aligned with space research and technology are now venturing into that area, right? China, India, and many others have been promoting their space industries. Certainly, the continent of Africa is also an evolving area for space. And so the Caribbean must also join in the space race. But for us, the space race is not going to be just the novelty of putting people or items into space. It will be using space to solve real societal problems, right? Using space technology to deal with the many issues that we face in the Caribbean. And so that's what we want to pursue. And I hope that this conversation will lay out a foundation for us to get there in that regard. And for us at the University of Technology, as Jamaica's premier national STEM university, this is certainly aligned to our mission and vision, right? And so our commitment is to advance a sort of research-driven environment, both in the Caribbean and further afield. So I'm really excited about what's going to happen today. You have seen the agenda. We have quite a few things to discuss. And we know that as small island developing states, we face a lot of disproportionate threats. So you may be asking, okay, so why space? You know, why of all the things that we could get involved in, why should we look at space? But as Dr. Nelson, I'm sure will expand on here in her keynote, space is no longer this exclusive domain of superpowers, as I said before, right? There's a democratization of space. Some of you may have seen what has happened around CubeSats, for example. So many countries have now had their first foray in space by launching CubeSats, these little tiny satellites, and they ride on the back of someone else's rocket, and they have their first experience of sending a mini satellite into space with sensors that allows them to do some interesting things. I mean, we can use satellites to track hurricane activity real time, we can monitor the coastal ecosystems as well. So this is why we're here today. And if you're wondering, okay, you know, I'm here, but really, why am I here? I hope this has really helped you to understand why this conversation is important. And we're really honored to have as our keynote speaker, Dr. Claire Nelson. She's a visionary futurist and a fierce advocate, I must say, for Caribbean space equity, right? And I say Caribbean, I really should add Africa to that, right? A fierce advocate. And I am fully in agreement with her. Africa, the Caribbean must not be left behind, right? And that is the challenge for us in here today, right? Because as I said before, we cannot allow the world to move ahead of us, and that continues to be our story, right? We must also ensure that not only are we aligned with what's happening in other countries technologically, but if we're possible, we should be leading and leapfrogging as well. And I'm also, equally privileged to welcome, as I mentioned before, Dr. Krishan Kode of the UNDP and Dr. Paloma Mohamed Martin from the University of Guyana. Again, just highlighting the whole sort of Caribbean position that we're taking on this, right? This isn't a Jamaica position. It has to be a regional position. When we're united, we're stronger. When we share resources, we get things done. And so, I'm really desperate to see CARICOM become, an engine of action, right? There are lots of things on paper that CARICOM should be doing, but we really now need to become a CARICOM of action, a CARICOM that leads, a CARICOM that's focused on technology. So to our students, our educators, entrepreneurs, researchers, policymakers, just curious minds out there, this symposium is a call to action, and your voice matters in this dialogue. And I want to thank you for being part of this significant forum. I invite you to participate. It is a forum, and so I want to ensure that you engage with us. So welcome again, and please do enjoy the symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for those insightful words. Next, we will hear from Dr. Kirkland Rowe, Senior Lecturer in the School of Engineering and Chairman of the Symposium's Planning Committee. Dr. Rowe will provide us with an overview of the program for today. Please welcome Dr. Kirkland Rowe.
Thank you very much. Thanks again to everyone for joining us this morning. It is indeed a pleasure to have you. I think Dr. Brown gave a bit of the overview and the expectations from this morning. But even as you look at the link to peruse it, you will have an idea of what it is that we intend to talk about this morning. And certainly you are here because of the title and the sustainability and the space agenda. So it is my pleasure to welcome all of you today to the Sustainable Futures Virtual Symposium. And I would dare tack on to it 2025. With the hope that likely we will see more of these types of events. And it's under the theme Advancing a Caribbean Space Agenda. The symposium represents a moment in the growing regional conversation on how the Caribbean can actually meaningfully participate in the global space ecosystem. And it's what we're talking about here is not that we are intending to build a spaceship on a launching pad and to send astronauts into space. But really, as we look towards a sustainable, innovative future, the space agenda is no longer just about distant galaxies or astronauts in orbit. It is about real-world, ground-level opportunities that space technology offers us here in the Caribbean. And for climate resilience and disaster preparedness, to STEM education, communication, and economic development, space is becoming an integral part of how we plan for and build a better future. And we'll hear many of the presenters talk about this aspect today. And so today's program has really been carefully curated to reflect both vision and action. We begin with the keynote speaker by Dr. Nelson, a pioneering futurist and advocate for inclusive development. After which, we'll have our plenary panel titled "The Future We Want," and it will bring to get together persons who are willing and have explored the policy and developmental framework that is needed to shape what we consider to be the Caribbean space agenda. Subsequently, we'll look at the next session titled Spades in Action, which will highlight some concrete examples of how space science and data are already being used across multiple disciplines, such as geographic information, system GIS, climate monitoring, spectrum management, and much more. And this is actually quite exciting, as it's not just a futurist perspective, but it's really a testament of how space is no longer abstract. And in fact, the data is being used currently in many different innovative ways, which are quite impactful for the Caribbean. Then we move into the building the ecosystem segment, and we'll hear inspiring field stories from advocates, educators, technologists who are also shaping pathways into the space sector for us Caribbean citizens, especially our youth. And finally, in our closing segment, where do we go from here? Next Gen, we spotlight the rising generation of Caribbean space leaders and international partners who are working together to keep the momentum alive. Throughout the event, I encourage you to engage actively, ask questions, share your ideas, and think boldly. This forum is not just about listening. We actually want you to participate. It's about building the bridges and shaping the future. We want you to look at even ways in which you might participate if you're all ready are not doing so, and what partnerships you may be able to form coming out of the event. So let us use today as a launch pad for more connected, innovative, and space-enabled Caribbean. Thank you, and I look forward to an exciting and thought-provoking event.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe. And for persons who joined since the start, you may access the program link in the chat. We're honored to have Dr. Claire Nelson as our keynote speaker. And on her strict instructions, I'll attempt to condense her vast achievements in a 90-second introduction. So Dr. Claire A. Nelson, Chief Visionary Officer of the Futures Forum, is listed among Forbes' top 50 female futurists. She's founding convener of the Omni Africa Space Exploration, Analog Simulation, and Space Ungana, Africa's premier space research and education gathering. The curator of the Space Futures Forum and co-founder of the Caribbean Space Society, recognized by Ascent for her advocacy for space sustainability, serves as advisor to various groups including Institute of Space Law and Ethics, Space for Humanity, and Mission Shaktisat of Space Kids India. Dr. Nelson, the author of the game-changing book Smart Futures for a Flourishing World, a paradigm shift for achieving global sustainability, is a sought-after speaker with engagements including UNOOSA Emerging Space Nations Workshop, Saudi Space Agency, World Bank Dubai Futures Forum, UNESCO Futures Festival, and the White House. A member of the board of the World Future Studies Federation, she also serves as editor-at-large of its flagship magazine, Human Futures. As social entrepreneur, Dr. Nelson is founding president of the Institute of Caribbean Studies in Washington, D.C., and is celebrated as the architect and convening chair of the campaign for June as National Caribbean Heritage Month. Recently named a Global Goodwill Ambassador for UN International Moon Day, the St. Hughes High School alum and White House Champion of Change holds a doctorate in engineering management from George Washington University. The University of Technology Jamaica is honored to be collaborating with Dr. Nelson as we work together to advance space-based science and technology in support of Jamaica's space engagement strategy, and certainly our broader national development priorities. Her expertise and advocacy are helping to position Jamaica as a meaningful player in the emerging global space economy. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Dr. Claire A. Nelson, futurist, sustainability engineer, social entrepreneur, and storyteller. Dr. Nelson. Dr. Nelson, you're muted.
They say there's nowhere in the world you can go and not meet up on at least one Jamaican. Well, I was the first Jamaican on the moon. I hope you're seeing my slides. I was the first Jamaican on the moon. And I actually went to the moon first time in 2034 to help set up the human heritage site, Kijiji Kilimia, which was to be a location for us to have the People's Village on the moon. Now, how we got here is a long story, and I possibly can't go into all of that, but suffice it to say that there were many, many friends along the way. I am not seeing myself, so I hope you're seeing me. Are you seeing me?
Yes, we are, Dr. Nelson. You may want to put your slides into slideshow mode.
I thought I did. All right, there we go. All right, there we go. So as I was saying, I was the first Jamaican in the moon back in 2034 when I went to set up the People's Heritage Site on the moon. And how I got there is a long story. It began when I first wrote a story, Moon Runnings, the life and times of the first Jamaican on the moon back in 2016. And from 2016 onwards, my life took on a different slant. It was only meant to be in a story, something like an Anansi story. But you know, Anansi has a way of making things happen. So today, I'm talking to you not from the vantage point of 2038, when my story begins, but actually from the vantage point of 2025, where I'm talking at the UTech Symposium on how we share space. I began my journey to space actually with the first question about how we share the future. I was concerned that as a species, we were definitely moving into the idea of overshoot. We were not living within a safe, just space for humanity. And the conversations I was in were showing that space was going to be the domain of the future. Outer space, cyberspace, and ocean space. And it dawned on me that the big question was that we had to ensure the future use of outer space did not devolve into privatization and armed conflicts, resulting from the carryover of a paradigm that we must only colonize and conquer. I wanted to ensure that we move towards a more peaceable future, ensuring future access to space for all humanity. For after all beings on Earth look up at the same stars, the same moon, and share the beauty that we live on this planet Earth, provided to us by the cosmos. So when we look at the stars, one thing I like to start with is saying, we do not do so because we want to escape, but because we want to survive and thrive. And Caribbean nations must not see space as distance and out of our range, but as a strategic frontier for sustainability, resilience, and sovereignty. In thinking about then this idea of space as shared, and believe you me, this is a big legal discussion that's taking place right now, the issues around the colonization of the moon and Mars, privatization of space mining rights, privatization of weather data, right to dark skies, data sovereignty, and so many other questions. And so we're at an urgent moment, if you will, the fierce urgency of now, where we as small island developing states must take a move to ensure that we have, for one, data and sovereignty about the things we need for our survival, disaster resilient planning, blue economy government, health systems monitoring, and so many other things. Space directly impacts small island developing states like Jamaica because they support our hurricane forecast and disaster response. It certainly is going to support our move towards enlarging the blue economy, especially now that we have a situation where ocean bed mining is viewed as a blessing and a possible threat to the life of not just the Caribbean Sea, but all oceans around the world. After I pause to say, we're not starting from nowhere. I mean, we have been in the early days of space involved. Barbados, for example, was involved in Project HARP, a high altitude research program, way back in 1962, when we became independent. And of course, many Caribbean nations signed the Outer Space Treaty as early as 2067. More recently, we see that in a couple of years ago, the OACS countries signed the Latin America Space Agency. And when I often ask, so what's it about? Certainly the people in Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Kitts have talked to us as recent as last week when I was in St. Kitts, but we don't really know what's going on. So we really have to look at the milestones of the past and look at the things that I personally have been involved with, establishing the Caribbean Space Society at University of Guyana, University of Trinidad and Tobago, and Northern Caribbean University, where 3 space clubs exist as the early seeds that have been planted in taking us forward. We're talking about a space ecosystem, a space economy, which is a full range of activities, resources. We're talking about all public and private factors that are involved in developing, providing, and using space-related outputs. So, as you heard Dr. Brown say, it's not just an economy that's a club for big billionaire buccaneers and boys. It's a space for everybody, women included, and over 100 countries are participating in space programs. And what we're calling the new space economy is talking about the evolving innovation-driven commercial space sector, the private sector, and how that has changed the potential. When the Outer Space Treaty was signed in back in the 1960s, or 1950s rather, nobody thought that private sector would be able to actually launch and travel to the moon. And we see most recently, private sector companies have been able to do that. So this space economy is over $1 trillion protected by the World Economic Forum. And it is an explosion of private investment. Indeed, during the COVID era, many of the first space tourism flights happened. And we had, in one instance, the woman from Antigua, Keisha Shahaf, which was selected by Virgin Galactic to be the first Caribbean space tourist. And I mention that because tourism is something we understand. Yes, space tourism is a thing. There are many opportunities in this new economy, from disaster risk to telecoms to education to, yes, tourism, space sports, space theme parks, suborbital tourism. And of course, people are looking at how manufacturing in zero gravity environments might change the way we look at certain very specialized drugs, etc. So why does this matter for the Caribbean? Because inclusion in new space economy will be necessary to build our resilience, digital equity, and above all, sovereignty. We can leverage space economy for managing our blue economy, which is certainly a vast undertaking. And this is just one point, and I want to hone in on the blue economy, because coming out of last year's UN Sustainable Island Developing States Conference, the blue economy was posed as the next big thing. And many of us are concerned that, yes, we might have the economy so much so that we destroy the marine environment. And being able to monitor the blue economy from space will be very critical if we're to ensure sustainable use of our beautiful Caribbean Sea. So we can't afford to ignore space, because space powers everything. It powers our cell phones, the communication system, our banking systems, our weather information. And if we don't have our own capacity, we're going to be forever dependent on others. We need to focus on the fact that we need sovereignty, especially as the move towards privatization of weather and climate data has begun. Sovereignty and data. Sovereignty matters, because in this age of cloud computing and AI and satellite-based observation, it's a cornerstone of national security, national economic development strategy. We need to have it for security and control. If we don't have control over our data, we're liable to be, monetized by other people and not being able to monetize our own data. We need a sovereignty over the imagery of our country so we can do better disaster preparedness. Those of us who are doing mining, marine resource management, precision agriculture, it matters because we want to ensure that as AI becomes more and more involved in these systems, that we ensure there's cultural and ethical sovereignty, that we can be involved in the processes of designing the rules and the norms that shape the global ecosystem and how space data is used. And so there are many pathways to getting there. We are talking about developing our own data centers and cloud infrastructure, enhancing protection legislation, making sure we have the experts in cybersecurity, digital forensics, and Of course, having our own regional satellite programs and learning from other emerging space nations in Africa and the Pacific who have begun to do this work and see how we can move forward. So as you've heard, their benefits. Trade security is one. One of the issues when I mentioned this to one of my peers in the diplomatic corps in Washington, D.C., ambassador said, Dr. Ness is a great idea. We need to have marine domain awareness, just for the issues, watching what's happening on our sea. The benefits of oil and gas mapping, all this drilling that's happening in Guyana. Who is going to be able to monitor if there's a spill? How will we do this? How will we ensure that we as an ecosystem, the Caribbean space ecosystem, are learning from the people who have been monitoring the fisheries and monitoring the human trafficking? All these things are part of the future we want to look at. And I cannot leave without saying that the lunar economy, which is upon us as countries now race to be the first to establish settlements on the moon. We have two camps, the Artemis Accords, led by the United States, and the China-Russia Ruscom group that is also competing to be the first to have a settlement on the moon. And you might wonder, why should we care? Well, the whole conversation of ethics and equity around non-weaponization of the moon, cultural heritage, making sure we use the moon to protect our planet, ensuring that the moon does not just become like a private playground for the uber rich. These are things that we have to be at the table at, and these decisions are being discussed in global spaces as we speak. And so small island developing states have to come together using platforms like the Alliance of Small Island States to support a Lunar Commons framework, to ensure we have literacy. And this is why I'm so happy that Shakti-Sat mission coming out of Space Kids India exists, that is beginning the process of making us aware of the moon as an opportunity and a destination for human futures. So as I said earlier, we have a fierce urgency of now to ensure that the Caribbean space agenda is active, is seen by all, and it's about resilience and relevance. What's at stake? Our sovereignty, digital equity, our education, jobs, innovation we want, and of course, climate resilience and disaster preparedness. Without that, we're not going to be able to survive the threats that are coming year by year, stronger and stronger. The thing is that for those of us, all of us, as you know, have a spectrum management authority. We have the Caribbean Telecommunications Organization. They know that orbital real estate is getting very crowded. And this is another reason why we have to have these regional organizations supporting our entry point at these tables to ensure that the rules which are being redesigned right now do not further disadvantage small nations. So what we're calling foundational space literacy is fundamental. We want to ensure that we understand satellite systems. We want to ensure that our legal systems, our law schools are teaching the policies relevant to be able to manage these new technologies as they emerge. A new type of lawyer has to emerge. Foundational space literacy is fundamental because if we don't do this, we don't have trained talent, trained policymakers, trained engineers, trained technicians, the opportunities will pass us by as we are unprepared. It is vital. And so we're talking about enacting space laws and policies. We're talking about having something like a Caribbean Space Commission that can participate in regional and international collaborations. You're talking about my own baby, the Caribbean Space Research Innovation Institute, which will do the engineering work that needs to be done so we can have our own constellation of satellites. We're talking about ensuring that CARICOM itself has a space law and policy harmonization process. We're talking about space literacy and education pipeline from the primary school to the universities, and of course, participation in global forums, such as the International Astronaut Caucus and the Artemis Accords. So we're framing this Caribbean space agenda in the context of an ecosystem. It's not just this or that. It is this and that. It is everybody. It is the insurance companies that have to be also paying attention to the fact that space debris is falling in our seas. Well, what if it fell on an island and destroyed a whole town? Do we have insurance for that? That's the question I love to ask, right? Because that's where I began when I wrote my story, Moon Runnings, The Life and Times of the First Jamaican. Do we have insurance for that? We have to then take action, create a regional space policy task force, support the capacity building we need, and ensure that we develop the capability, the engineering and technical capability to be at the table when these discussions are being had. So the Caribbean Space Society already exists. The Caribbean Space Advocates already exist. We want to ensure we have a space consortium, a research consortium that brings together the technical institutions, Caribbean Space Agency coming out of the policy institutions, and of course, as I said, my baby, the Caribbean Space Research and Innovation Institute, that we will be involved in actually building out the technical and engineering systems. International Space Flight Day, International Asteroid Day, International Moon Day, World Space Week, Human Rights Days are all days we can use to participate in the global conversation that has been happening. And there are projects that we can launch immediately. CESRIC already includes the Northern Caribbean University. That's a global program I'm involved in. We can certainly for World Space Week this year, do a hackathon and essay competition. We can do a law debate. We can begin next year with the capacity seminars. There's things that we can do. We don't have to say, oh my God, it's so far away. We have to do all of this. We can begin from where we are with what we have. I want to affirm that the Caribbean Space Agenda is not just about rockets, it's about readiness. Can we see ourselves as ready? We must not wait to be invited to the table of nations. We must indeed create our own table and bring up our own chair. I want to thank the University of Technology for hosting this symposium. It's been a long-held dream of mine. And finally, I am seeing it come to life, and I'm so excited about the possibilities. The Space Futures Forum is a community of practice that is global. And now I can say, being here, I can say to us in Caribbean, let us claim our place in space. The sky is not the limit, it's simply just the starting point. I am so excited. So to begin where to go back to where I started, as I said, I was the first Jamaican on the moon back in 2034. Today we have the People's Heritage Site, and we indeed are at the table, and we have our own chairs. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson, for your very thought-provoking keynote and for framing the conversation for us around the Caribbean Space Agenda. Will you take a few questions before we move on to our plenary? If there are any. Does anyone in the audience have any questions at this time for Dr. Nelson? All right. If not, we'll move on to our plenary session. And this session is typed.
Yes, we have a question.
Someone's hand is up. Miriam Sani, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I'm just saying that the chat is disabled. So I don't know if other people are trying to ask a question. The chat is disabled.
Okay, you were just bringing our attention that the chat isn't disabled, but you can pose your question here.
No, I don't have a question at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Brown.
Right. Yeah. I think the host was muting everyone. Yeah, I was just saying to you, I have a question for Dr. Nelson. First of all, Dr. Nelson, thank you for your remarks. I certainly hope I can join you on the moon in 2034. The question I have for you goes back to some aspects of my opening remarks around CARICOM and leadership. We've seen several countries, including India, take to space using their own brain power, and through some level of collaboration, they have been able to do some exceptional things in terms of space. We don't seem to be having the same conversations, never mind the same level of activity around space in CARICOM or even on the continent of Africa. perhaps with the exception of South Africa. So what's your view on how do we get there? Because I have some level of frustration that the Caribbean and even the continent of Africa were too comfortable with being left behind, and then we consume other people's technology. And maybe I'm being a bit harsh by saying we're comfortable, but I want to see a Caribbean and a continent of Africa that's more aggressive around trying to move ahead with technology and certainly space. So what's your perspective on how will we get there, if and how do we ensure that this is now something that our leaders can focus on?
I'm going to jump right in and say that Africa is on the move. First of all, almost, I wouldn't say, maybe about 8 countries have space commissions or space agencies. Most importantly, in April of this year, the Africa Space Agency was launched. It's headquartered in Egypt. It was a huge deal. So the excitement is palpable. In Kenya, where I will be building the first Omni-Africa Space Exploration Analog Simulation and Research Station, when I launched the conference in 2023, we were certainly welcomed by the Kenya Space Agency, and my team on the ground had a meeting with them earlier this year in March, as we have received from community in the Chilby Desert the 5 acres of land needed to build out the first physical research analog station in Africa. Secondly, this year we went to Ghana last year. We also worked with the Ghana Space Commission to put on a similar conference. And this year we'll be going to Nigeria, which, as you know, is huge. And Nigeria being one of the signatories to the Artemis Accords, our goal there is to awaken the universities. Yes, they have been doing things with teaching K through 12, and a couple of them have aerospace engineers department. But the goal for the Space Ungana process is to create a consortium of research institutions in Africa, across the African continent, that will be looking at, certainly from my perspective, the 3 Pan-African projects that I'm a part of or proposing. So one is an African constellation, satellite constellation built by universities. The second is the Consortium of Research Analog Stations, beginning with the one that I am leading on and getting the people in Ghana and Nigeria to come rapidly along with me. Matter of fact, on Saturday, we begin our first analog astronaut training course online, beginning to train the people who will be involved in that process. And a third will be a metaverse version of a space world that will allow us to do some of the policy dialogues. It still becomes very expensive to travel across Africa. We're still talking about an under-resourced institution and continent. So we're going to use the frugal engineering and innovation approach, which is what I'm proposing for the Caribbean region. So by having this symposium at UTech, my hope is that UTech will support the establishment of my first Sustainable Futures Lab, like what I have in Kenya, like what I'm now working on in Nigeria and Ghana. We already have a university in Kenya that I'm partnering with to create this project out of. I'm certainly hoping that I can have the support of a UTech to take the lead in establishing this lab that allows us to move. We can't wait on governments that have more, quote unquote, data bread issues that they probably are consumed with. But I think those of us in civil society, including academia, can take up space. And so this is why we're proposing that we set up, first of all, an academic space. We already have the nonprofit space existing. The Caribbean Futures Forum is host of the Caribbean Space Society. Secondly, we're going to be setting up what we call a public franchise organization and company, which will actually be doing the engineering. We don't believe that governments are good at engineering. So we will create the engineering company to do that. We want to get support from the governments to have like a carte blanche, if you will, so we can go out and secure funding from organizations like the IDB that have something called a regional public goods project. We see a constellation of satellites being built by universities and technical colleges in the region as doable, eminently doable. And believe me when I say we have friends across the world ready to support us in doing this. So we're not starting from scratch. We have support and we can get support to do this. So that's where I would start. We can start with what we can do as academia and civil society. Whether or not CARICOM will decide to create a policy institute or a legal commission, something else, but certainly the OECS countries should do so because they have already signed the Latin America Space Agency agreement and they have no body to move it forward. So my hope is that coming out of this will put some momentum, put some oil in the engine, so to speak. And from here on, we'll begin moving forward because this conversation I began in 2018 when we launched the Caribbean Space Society. It's now 7 years later, and I had to go to Africa to begin because the Caribbean was not ready yet to hear the message. I think now with this listening position here, we are now at the point where I think we can start. And I do believe we'll have the support of prime ministers like Mia Mottley, Prime Minister Mitchell in Grenada, who are very forceful and very forward thinking, I think, to make sure that this happens.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nelson.
Right. I just want to say, Madam Chair, in response to Dr. Nelson, that the University of Technology is certainly committed to this space agenda. Your desire for us to lead is accepted, and it's certainly something we have been discussing prior to this symposium. Of course, we want to work with our partners across the Caribbean, such as the University of Guyana and other technical institutions. And in terms of a sustainable futures lab, certainly that's something that we will be seeking to establish at the institution. So we look forward to working with you beyond this forum. And what I would say to everyone here is that we're looking for partners both in the private sector and at the governmental level. And I know there are members of the Ministry of Science, Energy, Technology, and Transportation here with us. I want to welcome them and to say that we look forward to working with you on this space agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. We'll take one more question from Cheyenne Powell. Cheyenne, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Cheyenne from, I'm actually an alumnus from the Northern Caribbean University and University of Technology. I graduated from my electrical engineering degree in 2013, and I have a master's in astronautics and space engineering, and I'm currently completing my PhD in explainable artificial intelligence for spacecraft missions. I'm also a member of the International Astronautical Federation and also was a previous awardee of the International Astronautical Congress for my work. And I wanted to reach out and say that as a member of the Regional Committee for Latin America and Caribbean region in the International Astronautical Federation, I have had a few meetings, regional meetings with the committee, and they are actually happy to support the Caribbean region, as I am the only one from an English-speaking Caribbean country that's actually on this committee. So I just wanted to say that there is a large network out there that is happy, ready, and waiting to help and collaborate with the Caribbean, not only the Latin Caribbean countries or Spanish-speaking countries, but also the English English-speaking Caribbean countries as well. I have also spoken with the president of the Mexican Space Agency, and he's also happy to come on board with that. So just putting my support out there. I'm really happy to see that UTech as an alumnus is doing this, and I'm also happy to see that there's a growing community here, and I am here to help where I can. Thank you.
Sorry, Cheyenne, where are you based now?
So I'm currently based in the UK, finishing my PhD in Scotland.
Scotland.
Yes, but I'm based in south of England at the moment. I tend to just relocate wherever my research takes me. So I did my master's in astronautics and space engineering in Cranfield University. That's the only university in the UK that has their own airport. And I used my bachelor's from Jamaica, UTech, actually, to get through for my master's in the UK. Now with my PhD, I'm on a scholarship with the European Space Agency, where I was based there in the Netherlands for 6 months to undertake my studies in artificial intelligence. And that's where I worked with the team there to look into satellite mission planning and scheduling.
Fantastic. All right. So we would like to keep in touch with you. I don't know. Maybe
Don't
you could
worry
share
about
your,
that. Don't worry about that.
you have that contact, Dr.
Yeah,
Nelson?
she is one of my dearest
She's one of
young
your-
luminaries that
Great.
I stay in close contact with.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, Shiny, we look forward to working with you. Thank you so much for your intervention. And I'm really excited to hear about all the great things you're doing.
I also wanted to add as well, during my master's, I developed a life support system for deep space missions using microalgae located from different points of the world. And so I know that there is the chemical engineering department once did research in microalgae. So it's just saying that, knowing that that area of study is also being done in the university can be very beneficial for the space community. Thank you.
We have a lot of work to do, Shiny, and I hope that, as I said, I'll get in touch with Dr. Nelson. We'll see how we can work together. And we wanted to share that brain power with us in the Caribbean, not just the UK. So I look forward to partnering with you on some research activities here. Certainly, especially as we seek to establish this Sustainable Futures Lab. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again to Dr. Nelson for that keynote and for the continuing conversation with our partners. At this time, we move to our plenary session titled The Future We Want. And this session will be moderated by Dr. Kevin Brown. For this session, we're pleased to have Mr. Kisham Kode, Resident Representative, UNDP Multi-Country Office in Jamaica, and Dr. Paloma Mohamed Martin, Vice Chancellor, University of Guyana. So over to you, Dr. Kevin Brown.
Thank you, Mrs. Beckford. I hope everyone at the symposium, I hope you're finding the experience so far insightful. Certainly, I am excited by what I'm hearing, and we have more to discuss. So we're going to be having a roundtable at this time with two panelists. And it's a roundtable that seeks to make the case as to why the Caribbean needs a space agenda, because I'm sure this will be an ongoing question. I remember even when India started launching satellites and other items into space, the big question was, well, doesn't India have other priorities? Why are they undertaking a space program at this time? But of course, you have to find a balance between solving your economic challenges, but at the same time remaining, having a sort of futuristic outlook on space technology and the benefits to be gained. So we're gonna try and have a conversation around justifying a space agenda for the Caribbean. I'm joined by two experts in the form of Representative Kisham Kode from the UNDP Jamaica. He's the resident representative of the UNDP, United Nations Development Program, Multi-Country Office in Jamaica, where he represents the UNDP in the Bahamas, Belize, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, Jamaica, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. Kisham has been with the UNDP for over 25 years, and he has been assigned in countries such as China, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan. He has coordinated over $1 billion in UNDP grant cooperation to help external partners around the world combat a range of challenges, including poverty, enhanced systems of governance, justice and social rights, and climate change. He's a thought leader on various pillars of the development agenda, and he has published extensively. Now, for anyone who's not sure what the UNDP is about, I'll just enlighten you. The UNDP is present in over 170 countries and territories. And it's one of the UN's largest implementer of grant assistance in small island developing states, supporting over 2,000 projects in these small island countries to the tune of $400 million per year. So this includes partnering with governments on new strategies, policies, and institutional capacity building, including the Sustainable Development Goals. So I want to welcome Representative Kishane Cody. We also have with us on the panel our friend Professor Paloma Mohammed Martin from the University of Guyana. She's the 11th Vice Chancellor of the university. She's also a full professor of behavior and strategic communications, noted as a futurist scholar for her work on change in both humans and human systems. For her recent work on the effects of technology on human life systems is of international interest, and she's the first woman to lead the university in its 63-year history, and I want to congratulate her on that milestone. She's the first woman to be appointed the Vice Chancellor in an Anglophone Caribbean university. She has been a Deputy Vice Chancellor. She's also a philanthropist, and she's an alumni and amongst other things. And she was awarded not one, but two presidential medals in 2012 and 2015, as well as a City of New York Award for Culture in 2013 and 2013. So she has also authored many books, 20 books to be precise. She's produced 15 films, and she currently sits on the board of the Commonwealth of Learning and is chair of the Research Advisory Board of the Caribbean Examination Council. So we have her here along with Representative Cody, and I'm going to get straight into it in terms of the discussion. Initially, we are going to ask for each panelist to share some introductory remarks on the topic very briefly, and then we will go through with a few questions, including questions from the audience as well. So if I may ask, ladies before gentlemen, they say, so I'm going to go with Dr. Paloma Mohammed.
Sorry, Dr. Brandt, and just to jump in quickly, because I do have to run to another meeting, so I thought I might do very brief remarks before I have to depart.
Sure, go for it.
If you don't mind, Professor.
Absolutely not. Please go ahead.
All right, thanks. Thanks for that. No, but thanks for having United Nations at this event. It's a very important one, as Dr. Nelson mentioned, and thanks Dr. Brown, Dr. Nelson, UTech, and others for convening this important event on Environment Day. Yeah, so I mean, from our perspective, I think the Futures Lab is a great idea. We remain interested in furthering this discussion on the establishment of a Futures Lab and what international cooperation could look like, what the Futures Lab would entail, and what it can mean for the future. I think the space and development agenda will only grow post-2030 as we look now to the post-2030 agenda, the crafting of the new agenda, the 2050 agenda. And so I think it's vital across various goals, the new goals that will be set up. So United Nations Development Program, UNDP, as you know, we've been around in Jamaica specifically for 50 years. And one of our main roles has been capacity development across the Caribbean, I should say. We have 8 offices across the Caribbean. And so building on the inspirational opening by Dr. Nelson, 3 kind of capacity development elements. One on science, I would say, is something really important in Jamaica and the Caribbean. As we know, the Caribbean and the area just around Jamaica actually has some of the deepest deep sea vents on the entire on planet Earth. And as we know, that's one of the prospects for the origin of life. And so that has very important connectivity to a lot of space research and exoplanet research in terms of detecting life on other planets. So I think the strength of Jamaica, the academic community, the Caribbean more broadly, on marine and ocean science, I think there's strong connectivity, I think, to the astrobiology, exoplanet, that element of the space research agenda, I would say, but also other elements of research on the oceans agenda that could be of benefit for space research, as was mentioned earlier, I think, with the algae, et cetera. Technology also very important. I think the ecosystem of technology around the space economy is quite broad and extensive and expanding. Most of the technologies that will be there in 2030 aren't even in mind yet, I think. So it's a very fast-growing field. So I think technology transfer and development, local technology development, but also engineering capacity, et cetera, as was mentioned, but also technology transfer, South-South cooperation is something that we place a lot of emphasis on, not just with the BRICS, all of which have significant space agencies, but also beyond, as was mentioned. So South-South cooperation, I think, will be key for technology cooperation on the space agenda. Policy and governance was mentioned, and I think that's something that we really also pay a lot of attention to across the development agenda. So how do we connect some of these issues to the evolving governance? So if we're talking about, for example, the debate between commons, private and public, and the commons element, building capacities for negotiating within international legal discussions, that kind of capacity, negotiating capacity development for international law, making sure that Caribbean countries have a strong voice and strong participation and negotiating position in those venues for advancing, for example, the vision of space as a commons, but also even on the private side, likely. So on the governance and policy, and last but not least, just a nod to Dr. Nelson also, I think it's no coincidence that there's that connection with futures thinking, with that creative imagination element to it. And I think that's an amazing book, the Smart Futures, looking at the kind of post-2030 agenda, infusing that with that space kind of mythology, if I can call it that kind of fiction account of the future, but looking back and seeing how our engagement with the planet. And I think that's no coincidence that there's this connection between space and the environment and this kind of creative thinking and futures thinking. So I think that capacity for futures thinking is important. As we know, Earthrise, the view of the planet from space way back more than 50 years ago, was critical for global environmental movement and vision of the planet. And so it's only in our dreams what's to come in terms of where that imagination and vision will go in terms of the future environmentalism as we think about World Environment Day. So I think we remain very interested in the idea of a futures lab and some of these kind of capacity needs that exist, and look forward to further discussion. And thanks again for letting me go first, Paloma. And good to see everybody. Unfortunately, I do got to run, but look forward to talking more about all of this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ishan. Appreciate your opening remarks, and I agree that South-South cooperation will be important on this agenda. I don't know how long you will be able to stay with us, but we appreciate you joining this panel discussion. So let me quickly ask Professor Mohammed Martin for her opening comments.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we have a little storm going on here, so it's late joining. I tried to listen from my phone. I'd like to, first of all, thank you, President Brown, and of course, Dr. Nelson, who is such a visionary, but also an infectious futurist, for inviting me and the university and for your efforts in bringing this together, and to all former speakers for their contributions. I want to just simply say that I was introduced as an expert. I'm not an expert in space. I'm a space enthusiast, and I'm interested in the future, very interested. Don't ask me why. It just seems to be very, very powerful internal drive that I have. And so what I believe has been worrying me as a scholar, but also as Vice Chancellor and a futurist, is exactly what you've all outlined this morning, the fact that this whole question seems to be off the agenda of our region, and to kind of, first of all, figure out how we could get it on not only the policy agenda of the region, but also the public agenda. In the university, when I spoke with Claire, when I first met her 2020, when I first became VC, we were talking about engineering, and I wanted to talk about space, which is very interesting. We were talking about our engineering department. And I was interested in, how we could possibly solve some of the problems that we have in the region. And I could see from that perspective that for me, the multiverse, as I like to call it, is an ecology, a larger one that we can't actually conceptualize given the tools we have, etc. But I think all of everything is connected. And in that regard, what happens in space, as we're beginning to see more and more, does in fact affect us. In fact, we are a product of all of this. So I think this kind of thinking has to, first of all, resonate within our social spaces. I am a behavioral scientist and a strategist by training, right? Even though I focus on change. And one of the big things that I found, this is outside of the public, the policy level now, this is in just interpersonal knowledge and attitudes towards thinking and talking about space, because I think this is very important. We can do everything we want to do at a high level, and we have to, but the conversations about space and how people think about it. Because, for instance, in some religions, it is completely forbidden to think and talk about these things. And we are a highly religious region. Religiosity is very powerful. And so if people feel that it's evil to think about anything beyond space, or if it is some kind of dark magic or something when you're doing this work or even speaking about this, we have a major problem. That's the first thing. So we have to deal with perception issues. The second thing has to do with our education and what's in the news and our understanding that, yes, everything about space, as somebody mentioned it earlier, I think it was clear, dies when you get to 11. So we teach you about all the planets and everything up to, when you're 10, 11, 9, 10, 11. And then once you get into high school, this just completely falls away. There's a dark void. And that is a problem. We have to address that. I've been advocating over and over for a stream in the Caribbean. A very simple thing to me, but maybe not easy to implement for technology. We have a science stream that, of course, teaches physics, biochem, whatever, if you want to be a doctor. But a technology and future stream, that has to be something that we implement from the school system right away, right now. Because, again, we could be doing all of these things at a very high level, and then we have no people to feed them, no interest. You can't just force people into do. These are very complex subjects, people who have to be really interested and so on. And I happen to know from the University of Guyana's perspective that there are students who are very interested in astronomy, interested in the stars. We have an astronomy, an astrology astronomy club on the campus, and they take the most beautiful photographs every few nights with a one of our high-powered telescopes, and they post them in this group, and they're lovely. But the conversation beyond, oh, this is beautiful, does not really get hooked into anything beyond the small group of 15, 20 students and an old professor who absolutely loves it. They presented to me recently a proposal, because I was at a particular event that they were at and asked them what they needed. They presented a proposal for what they see as a simple thing, but I see it as an observatory in a particular part in our country, because we have this, the geolocation of Guyana is probably better than in some other places in the region for space work, because of you don't have pollution, light pollution, you have, wide open skies, etc. And because of the geographical position of Guyana, right, on the earth, etc. And then you have the Guyana Shield. You have all these kinds of things that are, make Guyana a almost perfect place for doing this work. But again, we can't seem to get past that this is a big thing. This is, huge. It's too big for us, etc. And I think the public education part, putting the structures in place early in school, not ending the agenda, the teaching agenda at upper primary, and also getting the conversations into the public domain, the writing. They're futurists in the Caribbean who blog. I don't know how many people read their blogs, but I read, for instance, every night because of, my phone, my cell phone now, and my interest settings, my preferences. I read 2 or 3 articles every night before I go to sleep on what's happening in space, not only happening in what's happening with, the probes that are out, etc., and what they're sending back and what we're learning and how this is changing science and what we know about ourselves on a daily basis. But this is not getting into the kind of public stream of consciousness, public conversation. And that is something we have to do. In addition to all of these other things about getting CARICOM involved, getting persons to help us with our satellites and work that we want to do. University does work with NASA, our university, and we do work with NASA and the GIS mapping department of our Faculty of Earth and Environmental Sciences. They're doing tremendous work with others in mapping the coastal changes that are happening for Guyana, because we're below sea level. We're more below sea level than many islands in the Caribbean. So this is a major issue for us, as well as other things. So there are applications, but we're not moving to really fundamentally affect how we will take a place at the table where we know all of these things that we need to do. But really, I think at the very ground level, we also need to focus on some aspects of this: education, teaching, public awareness, of course, linked to public policy and resources. Thank you. That's a lot.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Mohammed Martin. You've kind of really set the stage for us in terms of some of the key areas that we need to look at. I don't know if we still have Representative Ishan with us, so I might pull Dr. Nelson in to cover. Professor Martin, one of the things I'm all about institutional building and sustainability, right? So, it's not about space today, forgotten tomorrow. It's about space today, sustained for a lifetime. What are the institutional and legal building blocks that you think we need to establish in the Caribbean in terms of policy framework, right? I don't know the landscape in CARICOM, but where should we start in terms of sort of building out a framework? What does a Caribbean Space Agency look like? If there's such a thing,
Well, I don't know that I can answer that question very well. Maybe Claire could answer that better than I, because she is on the hard, the kind of hard side, the hard science side. But I certainly do believe that this question does need to get on the agenda of governments in the first instance. I do know that Guyana, for instance, has been doing work with Mexican Space Agency. I do know that we have an interest I've seen from the Office of the Prime Minister in our country, where that portfolio lies, that he has recently, I think within the last year or so, been doing work with Mexico and has been trying to put this on the agenda. I guess because we are pushing him from the university side, but also I think the government of this country has a very big vision for what Guyana's role could be in the region and what the resources we might have at our disposal, not only financial resources, but also resources where we are and other kinds of linkages that we have. So I think that is partially what has to happen. This needs to get on the agenda of governments, the first thing. These Caribbean governments have a voice together in CARICOM, and CARICOM is not insignificant at all. But they have some very key players in that work with them and support them, such as European Union, and so on, who have clearly a very influential voice and have the resources, both in terms of money, but experience. And of course, they have China, etc., Japan, all these countries that work with CARICOM and fund certain aspects of them. So I think that from our perspective, we do need to push an agenda and write to them and say, look, this is something that we like to do, but it has to come from the governments because it can't parachute from nowhere. You know what I mean? So even if we find a champion, I think Guyana might be interested in doing that. I heard Dr. Nelson mention Prime Minister Motley was quite progressive herself. I think there's a young Prime Minister in Grenada that we have a relationship with that we could probably talk to him also. So if you get a consortium, I think St. Lucia also is part of the Latin American Caribbean Space Agency. They've signed on. That I found very interesting. So you do have St. Lucia. And in fact, St. Lucia might actually be the one to advance this since they seem to have an interest already and have taken a step. But that's I think the process. The infrastructure is follows, I think, but I think it fundamentally is political and other will, and there might be other things that are happening as well. And I've already spoken at length about what I believe is the clarifying of the importance of outer space to not only our interests, our present interests. So everything that Claire spoke about, resources, independence, lack of having a seat at the table, God forbid. People are planning to be off Earth in a couple of billion years or something, because the Earth, as we know, is we love it, but it's probably not going to be around forever. So are we going to be present on those flights going? Claire has said she's going to be there, but the fact is, if we don't put things in place to ensure that we're there, but then there are present issues, right? So I speak at our law school. When I spoke this year at the opening of Law Week, I spoke about a very simple thing that has happened, real. Somebody has hacked somebody's account from outer space. No way to address that because the legal framework is not permitting us at this point to look into these things, far less the treaties and arrangements, and then the issue of insurance. We had a satellite burn over the Caribbean a couple of months ago, and this is a real thing. So these kinds of real events, I think, can be catalyzed thinking and focus of governments which are stretched to deal with day-to-day, real serious day-to-day things. So they're probably not always thinking about, the far future or anything like that, but it's for us to do that.
Thank you.
So
Rob,
that's what
Yeah, thank you. I want to bring in and be request for time, but thank you so much. I wanted to ask just as a follow-up.
I just run quickly here to just answer the questions about
Well, I was gonna reframe it for you, Dr. Nelson, because clearly the case has been made that government has a role to play. But if anyone knows anything about CARICOM, it is a big paper tiger. There are many initiatives there, well written, well documented, and the adoption by Caribbean countries has been very mixed, if not limited. How do we overcome this CARICOM legacy as it relates to space, whereby how do we get CARICOM to move beyond just being a paper tiger, especially on the topic of space?
Well, I've given this a lot of thought, as I said, from 2018. So I do have a strategy that I think is much more functional and actionable. There are many regional functional cooperation agencies that already exist that have elements of the space agenda. So by establishing the Caribbean Space Research Innovation Institute as a public franchise. So it's like Aerospace Corporation America or MITRE Corporation. These are privately run, but government, quote unquote, sponsored companies, mostly engineering companies that do business on behalf of the governments. I'm proposing that structure so that this organization could go ahead to work with the universities and the existing functional cooperation institutions to run all the engineering pieces and the technical knowledge pieces. Now, for example, in terms of climate data, we already have SDMA and the meteorology people. We have 5Cs already out there getting some data from the sea. We have CTU on the spectrum management and communications. So there's no need to form another huge entity. We've got to be frugal, we've got to be lean. And the only thing that might need to be formed is coming out of the chairman of the CARICOM technology policy committee. There would then form a small Caribbean Advisory Space Working Group, including some of the heads and technical experts from these existing agencies, but the functional engineering of that and planning will be run by this private sector type of run entity, which is what I'm proposing we establish. And so this is something I've given a lot of thought to. I think if we wait on a traditional approach where CARICOM sets up, it's not going to work. And let me just say, that's the way Iceland is doing their space. That's the way Singapore Space Agency is run by the private sector. Iceland Space Agency is run by the private sector. So there is precedent for this. And I think that's the way we have to go. We cannot wait. All we need is basically permission to operate. And then I think between the universities that have so much talent that's underutilized, there's no need for us to go and build a separate lab somewhere else. Between the labs at UG and UTech and UE and UTT, and we have enough places that we can do things. It's a whole different way of working, and that's why it has to be run through an engineering lens. And we already have the law schools that can be involved at all these schools. So we're not going to be starting from scratch. We're using what we have in a very different way because we now have the technology that allows us to design a smart approach. So we're using a smart design approach to do this work. And we're not going to be using the traditional way of establishing a company where everybody's brought it. No, we're going to use the talent we have and deploy them differently. And I think one of the organizations that kind of work like this already is SDMA. SDMA doesn't have a large staff. They're using staff around the different national disaster agencies, and I think we can do some of that to build out and move very quickly. So that's the proposal that we are making to the governor, to the prime ministers that we have targeted, and one with whom I've already spoken. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. So that's very clear in terms of a private sector drive there, and perhaps that is the way to get this off the ground. Certainly that's the direction that the United States has turned, although interestingly, it has to be noted that in the United States, although the actors are private, the funding is still heavily government.
Exactly. Well, in our case, for example, between the climate finance and the regional public goods project, the Caribbean Sea is an economic zone that is owned by all of us. So there's an opportunity for us to build a CubeSat. And we have on the call, for example, Dr. Vikram Biswanath from Mauritius, who already have launched a CubeSat. We have people from Ghana who are going to join us who already have launched a CubeSat. So we have people from small states who have done this in a very frugal way that can say, this private sector entity will be a non-profit public research corporation, but it has to operate like an engineering company. Otherwise, we get lost in space doing all the political things, talking, it's not going to work. So having this Caribbean Space Research and Innovation Institute as a public research franchise run as a private corporation, I think is the way to go. And that's the way that I am proposing that we move forward.
Absolutely. And I know all about engineering. I spent over a decade in the aerospace engineering sector working for Rolls-Royce in the UK. So I agree with you. Yes, I'm sure an engineering firm can deliver it.
Kevin, can I put a quick question to Professor Paloma, please, based on what she said?
I saw your hand, so we're going to definitely allow you to ask a question.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that. And in a sense, Claire just touched on it as well. So, Professor Paloma, an inspiring analysis of your sector in terms of the higher education. How do you see, what are your thoughts in terms of teacher training and the actual institutional knowledge mobilization of the higher education sector itself? Because obviously if the teachers are not aware and have the confidence and the competence and have had the capability going through their training, how is that going to translate into delivery into our high schools, technical education, etc. And I'll just make a quick point going back to, I won't name the country, but Caribbean country. But in the early days when they became independent, somebody quite high up asked them, well, why do you need an airport? So anyone, I think, who asks a Caribbean country, why do you need to be involved in space? It's the same kind of question.
Yeah, I agree, Rudy. And that is going to be the persistent question. Why do the Caribbean need to be involved in space? Anyway, I'll allow Prof. What was the question pointed to Rudy? Prof.
To Professor Paloma.
Paloma, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. And it's an important question. So what the University of Guyana is doing, because we have a teacher, Faculty of Education and Humanities. And 2 years ago, when we were coming out of COVID and I had just become Vice Chancellor, they were restructuring the teacher education unit to basically put most of the programs online. Because we were trying to deal with the learning gap, etc. And I took that opportunity of convincing them, and it took a lot of convincing, to create an educational technologies and futures unit. And from that unit is where we would be hoping, because I got them to put it on the books to create the structure. But now the question you're asking is, how do we actualize it? How do we operationalize it? Who do we get to come and teach in there? So, because we really don't have anybody really, but it acknowledges what we need. So that is there, and we're now in the process of getting people from all over the world to come, not only online but also come physically, to come and create the curriculum for this. So it has to do with helping teachers to use technologies, but also looking at the future of technology and the future of education as well. And so in here, our space program at the university is in an institute. Sorry, we have construction at campus. I hope you can hear me. It's in an institute called the Institute for Human Resiliency, Strategic Security and the Future. That's where our space program, our space club is run from. Right. And so that should tell you a lot about how we're thinking about it, not only in terms of education, but in terms of what it means to security, to human resilience, our resilience, but also to all these other sectors that we are interested in. Well, we do need to find people to teach and to help us to build the programs out. Don't know if that helps you.
Yeah. Well, that's a good response, Prof. And I think Rudy has hit the nail on the head insofar as a lack of capacity, right? So we heard from Shaini just a few minutes ago, right? Where is Shaini Powell? Shaini Powell, although being from the Caribbean, is based in the UK, right? Doing great things, amazing things in the UK. I was in the UK for 23 years. How do you bring home this brain power to now work in space and aerospace, right? That is going to be a challenge. You were asking Professor about who's going to teach these subjects. You are right? So what do we now need to do to attract someone like Shaini Powell back home to teach at our universities? And that's an ongoing challenge that we have to deal with. I would say, Rudy, just to chime in on your question, that it has to be a whole of education approach, meaning that I think what is working in our favor currently is the focus on STEM. So at least right now, both in the Caribbean and elsewhere, there's a lot of conversation around STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I think that's a good thing. But we now need to ensure that within our schools, both from primary, high school, right up to tertiary education, we are building our capacity. We're exposing our children to STEM subjects. We're infusing them with a passion for STEM. So that we can have a pipeline for our universities, right? Because as much as UTech is STEM focused, unless I have a pipeline of students coming through, it just won't work. And then these STEM graduates will now need to enter a dynamic economic framework that includes space, where they can stay in the Caribbean rather than migrate. Over 80% of tertiary educated Jamaicans leave Jamaica, right? That was me 23 years ago. And I assume the same obtains in Guyana, right? So even where we're producing these tertiary educated graduates in science and technology and engineering, they don't stay in our countries. So we're facing a huge task here, but I think at least this forum presents a discussion point for us to look at how we can change the narrative. Sure.
Could I just quickly say then, Kevin, and just quick to that, one of the key areas, and I think, again, space offers a great opportunity in terms of a gateway. So if the higher education system could be then used as the gateway for that knowledge mobilization and involvement, where there are no barriers, because obviously knowledge transfer, and you could create programs, you could actually have more visiting professors, professionals, and the higher education system, I think, will be much easier to work that kind of process from a policy perspective. But not only that, what that would give as well, Professor, is more opportunities for you to partner with other universities. Some of the work that I'm doing at the moment is in there are universities all over willing to partner through comparable international comparative studies and looking at new areas of collaboration in order to accelerate the process towards the 2030 goals. And I think the higher education system is an open goal in that area if more thought could be put in that direction, much more collective communication now. So we're now talking about really communication from the higher education sector in the Caribbean to other universities, and particularly those universities where those of us of Caribbean origin operate in, and the institutions as well. And of course, you have Digital Commonwealth, which again can give huge support if there was that push from the academic world in the Caribbean into this future this future space, or the future space that Dr. Clare's always talking about. So, and that would actually back up some of the content, because Dr. Clare has actually worked out the content that we would need in the academic institutions in the UK, USA, probably Canada, particularly UK and USA. But what we need are the academics from within the Caribbean with some kind of clarity and say, actually, we're willing to take that knowledge transfer from the other and collaborate, actually. And also it's a way of producing funds back into the higher education system as well. So we just need some, what we call more creative thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that area.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rudy. You're right. We do need greater partnership, and we do need our academics here in the Caribbean to engage with the topic. So unfortunately, we're out of time. So we're going to have to wrap here because we have another panel session, and we are overrunning slightly. I want to thank everyone for your patience, but I hope you found the conversation so far very useful, and you're learning lots about where we need to go as it relates to space in the Caribbean. I want to thank my panelists. We had on this panel discussion Representative Tishane Powdy from the United Nations Development Program Multi-Country Office in Jamaica. And we also had Professor Paloma Mohamed Martin, Vice Chancellor, University of Guyana. And of course, you heard from Dr. Nelson and Rudy Page there as well. So I want to thank them for their participation in this panel discussion. A lot of work is to be done, but at least the hardest thing in life is to start. And I believe that we have signaled an intention here to start the work. And we should see all of us here as pioneers, but also partners as well in trying to get this going and to progress into the future. So thanks again to my panelists, and thank you to everyone. And I look forward to the rest of the session. I know there's another interesting panel coming up, so don't go anywhere. Stay with us. We're almost done. But before I go, I also want to encourage you to stick with us beyond the the forum today, because we will need everyone to play their part in getting involved. So I think you've already stood on the Zoom, Mrs. Beckford. So we have people registering, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So we will be in touch. And for those of you who have not just the technical expertise, but the enthusiasm, I hope you will, keep in touch with us on this journey. So I'm going to hand you back over to our moderator, Mrs. Michelle Beckford. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Doctor. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Brown, and thank you to our plenary speakers for their insightful contributions on envisioning the Caribbean's future in the space sector. And I'm going to ask if anyone else on the call has any burning questions or comments. Your voices matter, and we want to hear from everyone. So please post them in the chat, and we'll try to take them at the end. But at this time, we're going to move on now to the roundtable dialogue titled Space in Action. And it will be moderated by Alani Ali, Director of Caribbean Space Society and focal point for Caribbean Futures Forum out of Trinidad and Tobago. We'll hear from panelists Dr. Vikram Biswanath, Research Coordinator, Mauritius Research and Innovation Council, Dr. Glendon Newsom, Acting Vice Dean, Faculty of the Built Environment here at UTech Jamaica. And we're also expecting to rejoin Dr. Richard Damore, Assistant Professor Climate Science Division, Morgan State University. I turn over now to our moderator, Alani Ali.
Thank you, Michelle. What a great session so far. Welcome, everyone. So I think the last couple of minutes, we have been exposed to a lot of developments, a lot of expectations, and also the reality of the long journey ahead that awaits us all. And what is one of the most brilliant things out of forums like this is that we're able to share in a space, no pun intended, not just the latest advances in the international space, no pun intended, but it's also great to understand how we have been leveraging the technologies and the UN representative, I can't pronounce his name properly, so I'm not going to butcher it. He did say something that was quite profound, where he said that the technologies for the year 2030, they haven't even been thought of. And, anyone who sits in the technology space, we understand that the future technologies are usually based on the predecessors, which would be what we have now. So if we're thinking about the future, it would be really great to understand how the existing technologies are currently being leveraged, and perhaps it will give us an idea of the direction we should go. It may not give us the full 9 yards, but at least it can help to illuminate the path forward. And that is principally why we are here today, all of us, be it students, the professionals, the professors, and the subject matter experts. We are all here because we are genuinely interested in how we can move forward, not just the Caribbean region, but how can we contribute to the total humanity drive towards a better future. So with that being said, I would like to jump straight into the questions that would be asked to the panelists. So I'm not going to identify anyone in specific. I think it would be, I would ask the questions and have the floor open, and anyone who wants to jump in and start the discussions, please do, because I believe this type of organic approach will allow for better collaboration and more information to be shared than me selecting someone individually. So with that being said, the first question put forward in the roundtable discussions is, how are satellites currently being used in the Caribbean for disaster management, agriculture, or marine conservation. And these three have been identified because of the criticality of it. Dr. Nelson, she spoke to the blue economy. And we should not pretend how important it is that the marine life, the ecosystem, and the current business developments within the region are going to have long-term impacts. I can speak for the Trinidad and Tobago experience, not in any great detail, very topically, but we had a thriving fishing industry prior to the days of Amoco and the BPs when they first arrived. Fast forward 20, 30 years later, we don't particularly have a thriving fishing industry. And potentially the fish that we do eat pretty much is probably contaminated. I have no data to support this, but considering the activities that have been happening in our waters with regards to the oil and gas sector, considering that some monitoring has been done, some environmental control has been done, but the long-term effects have not been addressed. And the long-term effects are we lost an industry that could have potentially been a sustainable one, either for ourselves instead of importing salmon and fish and other fishes and all of those things. We could have had a sustainable fishing ecosystem where we could have even supplied the region. Agriculture, I think it's quite obvious that the human population juxtapose the current production of agriculture produce, it's waning, it's not equal. And you know, Professor Paloma, she can definitely advocate and state that at one time Guyana was the breadbasket for the region. But I'm not saying that to say that the dependency is on Guyana, is that it presents an opportunity with technology to give agriculture an opportunity to really be sustainable. And marine conservation and the disaster management, they all tie into the sustainable future. And so with that being said, the floor is open to, you know, Professor Paloma or anyone who wants to or who's aware of how satellites are being leveraged in these three areas or otherwise.
Okay, I didn't think I was still on the panel. I'm just listening in the
Actually,
background.
no,
but since-
I think that Dr. Newsom was going to take that.
yes, because she asked if you know, so
Okay.
I'm here listening and giving support. I could answer, but I don't think this is my panel. So Claire, I'm going to step away. If you need me to fill in, I'd be happy to, but it's not my panel. Okay. Somebody else was going to take that question. Dr. Professor. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay, so first of all, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to contribute to this very important discourse as it relates to the use of satellite imagery within the Caribbean. I'm a trained land surveyor, and I dabble a little bit in GIS. And when the question was posed to me, what came to mind immediately was a system which I was introduced to some few years ago, and some of you might be familiar with it, and that's the Copernicus system. It's actually named after the great European scientist and observer Nicholas Copernicus. So it is a European Union revolutionary Earth satellite monitoring program. So it covers the entire globe, and it uses satellites in space and measurement systems on the ground, in the sea and the air to deliver data for information and services across the globe. And of course, that would include the Caribbean. So there's quite a number of applications, land monitoring, marine environment, atmospheric monitoring. And of course, I know we're talking about agriculture and disaster mitigation and sustainability. As I said before, there are many and varied applications for this. This particular system has been put to include in climate change. Of course, they make use of the Galileo satellite constellation. Most people will be familiar with GPS. There is no, and there was always GLONASS, which was Russian, GPS being American, GLONASS Russian, Galileo is the European equivalent, and there are about three or so others. But Copernicus uses the Galileo system. So what happens is that it actually delivers quite a range of satellite imagery at different resolutions. They refer to them as sentinels, and they come at various resolutions, 4 to 40 meters, 10 to 60 meters, that type of thing. And of course, they would suit the various applications to which we would like to have them put. For example, ecosystems, water, biodiversity, precision agriculture, which is a very important area because it actually assists by using positional data, for example, to apply chemicals, fertilizers, etc., so that actually improves efficiency, cut down on waste, and also the whole matter of imagery that can be used to sense disease in crops, right? So those are some of the applications in agriculture. And then the data can also be used for urban planning, which of course contributes to sustainability, energy, climate, wind, a whole host. In fact, there was also a situation where the imagery, well, in general, the imagery can also be used to monitor, for example, wildfire information. That kind of information shows up very well on the imagery. But if you zoom in on the Caribbean in particular, there was an instance where it was used to detect oil spill off the coast of Trinidad, in the country of Trinidad and Tobago. So this particular tool is very, very, very critical. And of course, we are now facing nowadays, I know certainly in Jamaica, I'm not so sure in the rest of the Caribbean, where we are being affected by sargassum, and this is another area that the Corpinus facility assists with monitoring the presence of sargassum along our coastlines, and general coastal monitoring, coastal erosion, that type of thing. So just wanted to put that one there. That's the kind of example that quickly comes to mind as it relates to the use of space data in surveying and mapping situations. Thank you.
That's great. That's great, Dr. Newsom. We have a question from Dr. Bisunath. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's not a question. It's I'd like to intervene with the Mauritian perspective. So, for those who don't know me, thank you, Dr. Claire, for inviting me to this panel. I'm not from the Caribbean. I'm from Mauritius Island in the Indian Ocean. So we are a small island developing state like all of you guys. And I would just like to begin by saying that there's one thing that I think we are missing, is that the notion of new space. New space, we can go into space more rapidly with less less financial means. So just to give you an example, back in 2021, we launched our first nano satellite. It was a small cube satellite, 10 centimeter cube. And we were able, and we won this, we were able to do this by winning the UNUSA JAXA competition, CubeCube competition. And once we developed and we launched this satellite, this opened a whole new perspective of use of space and satellite data. I won't be long. So we've been working a lot, and as our colleague, the professor who talked before us, we also explored Copernicus and the Sentinel data. While we could get some data, but it was not that relevant because of the resolution. We are a so small island, so resolution-wise, it's not good. So what we did is we did a survey of all the different governmental institution who use space data. And we have a list of consolidated list. And then we contacted international data providers. One of them is Airbus. So we are trying to see to get higher resolution data and analyze it and create that. The idea is to create a national platform because I am from a government body and create this national platform, crunch this data and allow and give it to the different institution. For example, Minister of Environment would like to see how the coastline evolved over the years. So in conclusion, I think there is so much work available in space, and it's just us to think how we can grab the low-hanging fruits. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Biswanath. With that being said, I have a question, but I would let, I saw Professor Paloma, she had her hand up for a question. Do you still have a question, Professor? If not.
It's actually a speaker from University of Guyana. Could you please let him speak?
Yes.
Is it Professor Oyedoton?
Sorry, I asked Professor Ueno to join because he's our GIS specialist and I put something in the chat. So Professor, if you would allow him to speak, go ahead.
Okay,
Just a comment.
first and foremost, thank you, Vice Chancellor, for the invitation. And just briefly, I'm sorry, I will not be able to put on my camera because I'm currently in an open space for an event where I came to do some presentation. Now, I just want to quickly talk about the platform that we just developed, which we call Guyana Coastal Analysis System. Yes, we developed it based on our desire to see how we can monitor the dynamics along the coastal environment. And this particular system, we developed it to be an open access, and it is based on two remotely sensed data sets, the Landsat and the Sentinel-2. Sentinel-2 because it has much more higher resolution and it has coverage of around 5 days. But the Landsat will be able to help us to monitor the long-term trend along the Guyana coastal environment. So for this particular system, we developed it to be an open access, and there are about 4 tools that we package into this system. The first one is shoreline analysis, which can be used to estimate, to evaluate the dynamics along the shoreline dynamics along the Guyana coastal environment. And it is built using the principle of digital shoreline analysis systems. But in this case, it doesn't have to be installed and it doesn't have to be incorporated into ArcGIS like DSAS used to, because you need ArcGIS to be able to run DSAS. But we use the same principle to develop it and put all of the calculations in Google Earth Engine to be able to estimate the shoreline dynamics along the coastal environment. So we can quantify using some of the images to the rate of shoreline changes, and even their statistics, the endpoint rate, the net shoreline movement, and all of the parameters that are available in DSAS, we try to bring them into this shoreline analysis system. So that's one of the tools. The second tool that we also developed for this Guyana coastal analysis system is what we call Coastal Squeeze. And this one we enable any user to be able to estimate a form of supervised classifications, especially the resources like human settlement, the road network, and all of this, on how they are playing roles on the mangrove. And you can use it for any other ecosystem. But we use the global mangrove data set to be able to program this system. But in any of the tools that I'm talking about here, we made provision for it in such a way that you can import your own data set. If you go on the field, you did some shoreline mapping by yourself, or you, as long as you have the data set in KML file, you can bring it into the system and use it to process any of the dynamics you are looking at. And when it generates the result, you can visualize the result. You can export the result in as a CSV file or shape file or some other parameters. That's one of the things that we package into this particular system. That the second tool that we develop into the system is called Coastal Squeeze. The third one is about bathymetric change. The bathymetric change is to be able to once you can have the samples of the bathymetric data set of any of the particular locations in the coastal environment of Guyana, and by extension, we can program it to any part in the world. But we use it for Guyana. So once you have the sample locations that you can use as a training data set for the remote sensing, remotely sensed images, those kind of things, you can use it to evaluate how the spectral reflectance that could be used to estimate the sea level change. So if you use this bathymetric change, it's going to let you know a kind of maximum predicted level of change and the minimum, and that is part of the things. And the last tool, the fourth tool is what you call flood detection and modeling, but we base it on SRTM to be able to identify the areas that have experienced flood. Maybe when you choose the last 10 years, the area that have experienced flood by 10 times or 5 times, or the area that have the potentials of expressing flood. So those are some of the tools we package into Guyana coastal analysis systems.
Thank you, Professor. That is brilliant. I do have a question. I see Valerie Grant has a question, but before we go to you, Valerie, I just want to ask a question to Professor. Have you, in terms of the policy and the governance aspect from the public sector, the support of government, is the data being shared with the various agencies and ministries within Guyana, and specifically to the flooding zoned areas, the high flood zone areas? Is this data accessible by the Bureau of Statistics and the other stakeholders within the governments, the various agencies and ministries that can harness and leverage the data to make better societal decisions for Guyana's governance, or building frameworks, or even designing policies? Has it? Yeah.
Just to quickly respond to that, I invited on April 24, 2025, I invited almost all of the stakeholders that know we find this tool useful for a training on our campus, and they were exposed to the kind of facilities that we have. But please, in terms of the data set, we used globally available data set. That is, most of the data set that are made globally available, those are the ones that we used. Because technically, I have to be honest with you, especially when I wanted to train, when we were trying to train the data set for bathymetric change, I sent an email, a letter to the Maritime Administration Department of the nation. If they're going to send me any data set, maybe they're going to send it tomorrow, because I did not see any. So we had to make use of we find it hard to get the local data set from most of the agencies within the country. So we had to make use of the global data set. But the way we package this system, even if peradventure people don't want to share their data set with us, but they can use these tools to process their own data set, because we made it available that it is open access. As I'm talking with you now, you too can go there, go to the system. I made available the user guide, which will make it as simple as possible to guide anyone in using the tool. What we have developed is the tool, and the data set we use in working on the tool are the global data set. But that does not mean that anybody cannot use it for the local data set that they have. They can use it, and we made it open access. All right. I don't know whether I answered that question. And the choice of using the tool in making decision is left for the policymakers. But I'm saying it, I told them when we did the launching officially, and then one of my colleagues even emphasized it, that we are in the University of Guyana, we have open access policy. We have open access policy that any agencies, any non-governmental organization can approach us, and we do respond That is one of the things that our Vice Chancellor tried to enforce, that we need to be conscious of the nations, but we cannot force them to come. So whenever we develop anything like this, we
It's a
talk to
short
them.
panel, so I
Okay,
know you're
sorry,
passionate.
VC.
I don't want us to hijack this. You were just asked to make a quick comment. So
Okay,
thank you.
okay,
We can
VC.
talk about this some more. Thanks very much.
But they said there's one more question. Please let me quickly hear that one.
But short answers if they have more questions, please.
Yes, I'll make it short.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Grant, your question.
So I know my time is not yet, but I could not jump into the GIS conversation.
That's why I opened the floor to anyone who wanted to ask the questions, because everything is connected in the conversations that we were having.
Right. So I see my question was about the link. So I see that has been posted. So I more have a comment now. So one of the challenges that we have in the region, and maybe somebody can shed some light on this, is the fact that we have all these tools. And I've just heard about 4 or so tools that maybe I didn't know of before, but we have tools. We have the SIDS Global Data Hub. We have the CariGeo platform. We have tools in the OECS. We have tools around. My question is, why is it that we are not able to use these tools? Is there a way to get us to use the tools instead of creating more tools? How do we make sure that we can start working together and effectively use these tools? If somebody has an answer to that, I would be thrilled.
I think okay, Dr. Nelson, go ahead.
I'm going to jump in and try to answer it, because this is the whole point of the conversation. When I started the Caribbean Space Society and thinking about the architecture of an ecosystem of how things would work, I wanted to look at it from the point of view of, number one, let us not do the mistakes we have of the past of reinventing the wheel over and over again because we don't have the information. And so the idea of having a consortium of universities in that bundle. So it's not so coming out of this, the hope is that because we already have these 3 clubs existing, and if UTech is now going to say, yes, we're willing to jump on board and be like the meshwork gathering person, we now have a lab or an institute in an established university that would give me the opportunity to say, now we can have officially a relationship between what UG is doing, what UTT is doing, what certainly UTech is doing, and what GIS at Mona might already be doing. There might be other programs around the region. This is not going to be an exclusive club, because the whole point is, if we don't learn to collapse and coincide our resources, we're going to be faced with a challenge where we have, as you said, all these tools, nothing is working, and we're facing the same problem. So the paradigm that has to change is the paradigm that the professor said. Nobody wants to share their data. Like, hook up the data, it's my data. If the data is not solving a problem, it is of no use. So part of the futures agenda, and why I'm calling a sustainable futures agenda, is that, first of all, 2030 is just 5 years, 4 years away, basically. So we're already looking at the 2050 agenda. We now have, if you will, the authority, because of the SIDS conference last year, and this is why I invited Dr. Bissanoff to join us. Because of the SIDS conference last year, we now have a document that says, hey, digital innovation is going to be the way the small island urban states move forward. So nobody can any longer call me a heretic, because my ideas that were stated from 8 years ago are finally now being said in documents that this is the policy of the small island developing states. With that armature, we can now, if we will, convince the reluctant to come aboard and say, here is the vision of the solution, the future we all agree we want. Nobody's trying to silence your voice. Nobody's trying to step all over you. And so one of the things I use a lot in my social experimentation is the idea of seeing us not as a uniform marching band where everybody follows one command, but seeing us more like a mass camp, because Caribbean people understand the carnival band. Yes, we're heading in the same direction, but nobody's going to tell you that you must dip your knee at this point and you must shake your hip at that point, because That is what has prevented us from working together in a very useful way. And I think by having it using a cultural lens of entering the conversation, we're going to be able, I think, to make that paradigm shift for us to move towards the collaboratory. So the Caribbean Space Collaboratory, even better than a consortium, or the SIDS Space Futures Collaboratory will allow all of us from the small island states to benefit and be leaders in the management of at least one thing, which is the blue economy and the climate change agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. And I just want to say that, Dr. Grant, one of the key things is to understand that technology sits at as the central point of this. And we have so many technologies, and as a technologist, I can say it's evolving by the nanosecond. You can't keep up. And I think one of the most important lessons that we can probably take away from this is that there needs to be a common conversation in different realms, in different pockets, in different groups, but all coming back to a central focal point, because data is just data, right? Data only becomes information when it is meaningful. So when you think of all the data sets that can be amassed from the various systems, you start thinking of the aggregation of that data and then how that can be transposed to build and make better decisions, because technically that's what the whole data analysis world is about, right? It's how do we leverage the data to become meaningful information that allows us to make smarter decisions as human beings. So with that being said, I want to ask a question to Dr. Bisunath. Considering what you have heard in the last couple of minutes, the experience from Professor Aya Dotun and Dr. Grant's comment with regards to pooling together, we obviously understand that, and of course the previous comment about CARICOM being a paper tiger. What can you share with us, considering we're at this juncture of the conversation? What can you share with us from the Mauritius experience in terms of tying in the public sector aspect from the policy side, or the law, or from the discussion sides with the different stakeholders? What if you can just share with us very briefly, maybe 3 points that can allow us to probably have some clarity before we move forward, because the preceding questions are obviously going to have basis on what I just asked, because we're going into the realm of regional and international partnerships, etc.
Thank you. Thank you for this question. So three principles that I think have led us where we are here is, first, we have to select a champion who understands the overall ecosystem, because our governments, they are not interested into space. They see space for bigger countries. So the role of the champion is to make governments see the multi-billion-dollar opportunity that space business brings. So I think the first thing is making government realize that space is a multi-billion-dollar business. Then by organizing symposia, by inviting high-level business people in space to come give talks. This is one. Secondly, to try to leverage on, and in this, there are many of our diaspora who can help. So I'm sure we just heard from Dr. Brown. He was a scholar at Rolls-Royce. There are many other people like him in the Caribbean, in the SIDS. So realizing what space can do for us. Because if we rely on the traditional methods, then uh, we will be staying back in terms of mitigation of climate change. So identifying a champion who will sort of understand the how to convince government to get more interest, leverage on our diaspora, leverage on the younger generation because they are very techy and they are very much interested into space. And then what we did is to help all this is to do a sort of a technical needs analysis of all the different departments. For example, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Agriculture, forestry. What are the issues? How can space and satellite data help them? Just to give you one example, our Minister of Environment was saying that they were using Google Earth to do their environmental impact assessment, for example, to give permits to hotels. But this doesn't work. So by putting in the big guys, let's say Airbus, and trying to negotiate with Airbus, saying that we only need a small piece of your data. And can you give us this piece for a sort of a cheaper price? So these are the sort of negotiations that goes on, and trying to in a way bridge the gap with the very high end research that is going and bring it down to our needs. I don't know whether that answers your questions.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Biswanath. Okay, so my next question is, I guess, I don't know, Dr. Biswanath, if you'll be able to share this experience if Mauritius had it after. But the question is, what regional or international partnerships, example, UN SPIDER, GEO, how can they be leveraged to assist us in the Caribbean accessing data more effectively? That is until we can fulfill Dr. Nelson's dream of sending up our own constellation in the Caribbean.
Yes, so I think we started our sort of relationship with the UN USA by sending our first nanosatellite. So at the end of the day, and one more thing to add to the other question is to believe in ourselves, to believe each seeds we have our own capacity. We always tend to think that we are small, so we cannot do anything. We always believe that our resources are small, limited. But if you look into space from where we stand, our resources is limitless. So, and the big guys who are spacefaring, the US and you name it, Europe, they need us to explore space more. So I close this chapter.
Yes.
But when we talk about trying to leverage on these data, UNUSA is ready to help us. They are more concerned, for example, about space law. There are so many debris in space, and anytime a space object can fall in our territorial waters. So there is no connection there. Can we? They need us to give our opinion that this is our territorial waters, so we need to impose this and that policy. So I think we can let's take it the other way around. Instead of us wanting to use their data, let's try to see what data is relevant for us. And then I would advise, and I think this is where Dr. Nelson is coming, to bring together our common needs and then perhaps with a common need. And I'm pretty sure all of the small island developing states has almost the same needs, that we would like to know how our water temperature is evolving, what type of forestry, agriculture, etc. And then we could tap into that. And the United Nations Outer Space Affairs, they can help. We have developed contacts with them, and I'm sure we can, connect so that this organization for me is a central one, and they can direct us to the others.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bisunath. And
Alena?
yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, if I could just jump in very, very quickly on that point. I think how we're going to have to sell this space project is perhaps where Dr. Bisunath ended with respect to what's the benefit, right? So it's less about getting space, and it's more about, okay, if we are able to develop a space culture, economy, technologies, then here are all the things that we can address. Very important issues around climate change resilience, food security, and a whole host of other things that some of the other colleagues have mentioned. I think that's really where the emphasis has to be on the application of space, right? So this isn't just some vanity project where we're going to sort of try and get to the moon, but rather in the here and now, and certainly in the medium to long term, we want to use space as another opportunity to fix all of these burning challenges in the Caribbean. I think that's how we're going to get through to government. That's how we're going to get through to wider society. So it's going to be our space journey, at least right now, is going to look slightly different to, say, for example, India and China, who are busy trying to put satellites and vehicles on the moon. We've got to reposition the argument in the Caribbean to say, no. For us, space is about using that technology to solve our immediate problems, real problems that affect society right now, such as, as I mentioned before, with climate change, you have a hotter climate generating more risk around hurricanes, etc. How can we use space to have better predictions with respect to climate events? How can we use space to better manage our crops and ensure food security, etc., etc., etc.? So that's what we need to build out, and I think that needs to be the position we take for now.
Alana, unfortunately, we're out of time for this session. We will have to wrap up. As we said before, please pose your additional questions and comments in the chat, and we'll try to take it at the end or offline following this webinar. So thank you to our panelists for sharing their valuable insights on our collective role in advancing our region's impact in the space agenda. We will now hear stories from the field in our next session, looking at building the ecosystem. This session will be moderated by Rudy Page, member of the Space Pathways Ecosystem. And this session will feature Dr. Meredith Beckford-Smart, STEM education expert, Caribbean Space Society, and Dr. Valerie Grant, founder of UTech Vision. So over to you, moderator, Rudy Page.
Thank you very much. And of course, Ken Ruffin as well, who's recently joined us. Right. I think we're going to build on what's been said already. And for this particular forum, so the area of space literacy, research, industry engagement, and the opportunities that can transform opportunities for our youth, strengthen our institutions, and foster new Caribbean leadership within this area. And in particular, there are some key questions for each of the panelists to consider based on their experience in terms of how do we build space literacy amongst Caribbean youth, educators, and policymakers? What role can the Caribbean universities and technical institutes play in advancing space research and satellite development? What training programs or online resources exist for entry into the space sector, from engineering to law, data science? And of course, we must include the non-technical and STEM skills as well as part of that wider ecosystem. So I'll start with Dr. Valerie Grant, who is a leader in GIS and mapping and the founder of UTech Vision. Dr. Grant has been instrumental in using geospatial technologies to drive innovation, education, and enterprise throughout the region. So over to you for a few minutes, Dr. Grant.
All right, thank you so much. So I think I will just take it from the perspective that the reality is that I come to space from the geospatial side of things in terms of using Earth observation data and also driving some of the policies. But I also look at it from the other side in terms of what is going on in the overall ecosystem. So as we think about space, I think we should recognize that it all affects all of us because location matters. And as we like to say, everything happens somewhere. So location is a factor of everything that we do. So every data set that we work with, whether it's satellite imagery, so topographic maps, it's the sensors that feed, they have that spatial component to it. And that excites me because that is how we can really get to build our ecosystem. You speak about from law. And interestingly enough, one of the things that I do is host a podcast, and it's called Mapping the Conversations. And so we map those conversations. We talk about space, we talk about geospatial. And this week's episode of that conversation, we were talking about geospatial law and policy with one of the foremost experts in it. So whoever have not gotten a chance to listen to it, then Kevin Pomfret was really saying that a lot of the decisions that will drive our industry is not happening in the conferences that we go to, but it's actually happening in the courthouses at this point in time, because that's where some of the laws are changing. And AI and other things like that is really driving some of what that is. So in terms of how we have been working in the field to really help that, myself, I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. And right now we have what is called Jamaica Flying Labs. And that is one of the organizations that we really use to do a lot of our efforts in terms of exposing students to things like drones and satellite imagery. From time to time, each year in the summer, we have camps such as Fly Like a Girl, The Sky's the Limit, where we expose especially persons from underserved communities to really understand better and to bring exposure as to what is possible. I find that too many of our Caribbean people get into this discipline by chance, by accident. And so as professionals within the field, we have to be a lot more deliberate about how we go about making sure that persons have the access, how persons understand that this is something that's very real and they can be a part of it. And let them understand that they can also be there. I've sat in too many rooms globally where I'm the only Caribbean person, Black woman sitting at the table. That has to change. It just cannot happen to continue. And so the efforts that we make is to make sure that we do these kind of outreach. We partner with governments and also to do a big give back. I currently serve as the strategic advisor for the Director General for the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And I sit as several committees. And in that role too, we have been trying to make sure that through things like the Caribbean Geospatial Development Initiative, we have student competitions which helps students to really get to understand better what the possibilities are, and they get some amount of mentorship. We work with organizations like the Humanitarian Open Street Map, where we have these programs where we expose students to what is possible. And we are using these means to build the awareness and to really bring the exposure, as well as helping them to attend conferences and participating in conversations like these. Because like the youths keep saying, nothing without us. We have to make sure that we bring them along. And I've been a strong advocate that we have to build that culture of spatial thinking from the youths. And so even in the Jamaica GIS ecosystem, one of the things that I was privileged to be the speaker of GIS Day 2024, which has been happening for the last 22 years in Jamaica. And that is an initiative that I was part of the founding team, and we continue to do it up to today. And I'm happy to see that that effort has been sustained, that it is something that we have tried to do across the region and encourage countries to do across the region. So it's still baby steps, but we are moving in the right direction. And from the UN perspective, I also sit as the private sector representative for the United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management Group, Americas. And so we are trying to make sure that across the region, we mobilize in that way. And we are always conscious to make sure that education initiative, we work closely with the academic network and the universities across the region to bring solutions, to bring a wish brings in the youth, not just giving them something to, but to make sure that they understand that they can be part of the solution as well. And so we're excited to work along with Dr. Nelson. I'm excited to work along with her in trying to make sure that we can continue this work to make sure that there is this exposure to the youth, from taking it from a geospatial perspective, as well as exposing students to additional technologies that complements the entire area.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's certainly got the support from, I'm also a member of the British Interplanetary Society, which again is really making a determined move to collaborate with the Caribbean through the work that I'm involved in, and also with Dr. Claire's involvement. So it goes back to my question around the institutional knowledge mobilization and engagement that's really important. And there's great opportunity, particularly for the Caribbean Commonwealth, as it's well recognized. I'm also involved with the Canary Wharf Space Innovation Hub, which is the GEC initiative. I'll put the link in the group, which is about they're mobilizing to build a city in space. So they have the whole private sector industry behind them. So again, the UK is an integral part of this way of working. So let me move to Dr. Meredith Beckford-Smart, who's a STEM teacher, educator, member of the Caribbean Futures Forum, who brings deep experience in science education, teacher capacity building, culturally responsive pedagogy, and empowering the next generation of scientists and thinkers together. They represent the heart of this conversation, again, showing us what's possible through education, community, vision, and that alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals, which we're all trying to accelerate towards 2030. Dr. Meredith, over to you and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to join you today in this meaningful conversation on space and building the ecosystem. You know, over the past 25 years, as a biologist by training, I've led so many different efforts across schools, universities, and community-based organizations to make science education more equitable and immersive. From training teachers, launching real-world science career pipeline programs in partnership with the Department of Education, schools of medicine, higher ed, institutions, and community-based organizations, for example, local labs, my work centers on access and innovation. And so this journey has taught me that transforming STEM education, whether in New York City, across the globe, or in the Caribbean, depends on building locally grounded, culturally affirming ecosystems powered by cross-sector collaboration. So that is really the platform of the stories that I want to share with you today. That's really going to talk about two examples of how I was able to build capacities of teachers and the community so that we can support young people in terms of creating a pipeline into STEM in different careers. So I want to start with an example that I think aligns closely with what we're talking today with my experience as an executive director at GenSpace, which is the world's first community biotech lab based in Brooklyn, New York City, where we really reimagined what accessible science education could look like. One of our most impactful initiatives was the Break into Biotech program, which we launched last year in partnership with New York City Economic Development Corporation, which is a workforce development model designed to open doors for young adults ages 18 to 29, many of whom were disconnected from traditional academic or career pathways. Over the 5 cohorts, we provided hands-on training in biotechnology, lab techniques, and career readiness, connecting participants directly with mentors and employers in the rapidly growing life science industry in New York City. These young adults left out not just with technical skills, but also with confidence, clarity, and a clear path to the workforce. And I see a parallel opportunity here in the Caribbean. Programs like HEART, already here in Jamaica, have an infrastructure. So what if we just built on that, incorporating skills training in electrical technology, circuitry, and mechatronics, all essential to satellite design and space innovation. Just like we did in biotech, we can prepare young people to be builders, technicians, and engineers in the Caribbean space future. This is not only possible, but it's really necessary. Another story I want to share is my role as executive director of REACH and a senior researcher at Columbia University. I helped lead the Birds and Bots project, which integrated robot coding into standards-based math instruction for young students in New York City, grades 1 to 3. So it's an elementary program. One robust activity involved community mapping, where students program robots to navigate their neighborhoods, applying concepts like measurement, directionality, and geometry. This approach made math personal and relevant, connecting academic learning to students' real life, everyday experiences. We strengthened educator capacity and students' awareness of future STEM pathways through ongoing teacher professional development and engagement with STEM professionals. This model could be adapted across the Caribbean using local mapping activities to connect robotics, math, and environmental awareness while grounding space education in children's daily lives. Imagine regional hubs where teachers co-design along with STEM professionals, coding activities linked to Caribbean landscapes, mapping fishing villages, satellite paths, or mangrove forests, while building the skills needed for future space and environmental science careers. So I just want to share that underpinning this is the theory of change in my approach, which is my belief is if we ignite young, youth-led futures in science and space leadership, we can empower educators through place-based, culturally responsive learning and connect global innovation with local wisdom. To do this, we have to build teacher capacity, design relevant equity-driven programs, and strengthen partnerships that bridge schools, universities, and the community. And so I just want to end this because there's a lot more that I can say, but we really should unite and build a network of Caribbean space organizations, launch curricula pilots grounded in the local content, and invite youth, educators, and leaders to co-create the future of Caribbean space innovation. And I know that we can do this together if we cultivate the next generation of space changers rooted in heritage, community, and Caribbean brilliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And we certainly can speak on this topic with you because we have a program called the Space Pathways Ecosystem Creativity Awards, which is very similar. So it's about young people and their mentors identifying the challenges that are in their neighborhoods, and then they come up with a project to address those using the space technologies. And we've recently introduced the term community engineers. And that was particularly because one of the solutions, and in fact, it was Papine School in Kingston, Jamaica, less than a week ago, where somebody said what they wanted to do was to motorize a barrow so that when people are going to do their agricultural work, the barrow follows 5 feet behind them with all their tools. Because of recent times, there's been injuries with people carrying tools up to go and do their work. So it made sense then to think of the mechanics, the carpenters that are in the community. So we use the term community engineers. So it very much fits with some of what you've said in terms of the geospatial work with that as well. So great, I see great opportunities there. So I'm going to come to Ken Ruffin, who is an environmental engineer and board member of the National Space Society in the United States. Ken is passionate about space education and public engagement, working to make space more accessible to all communities. Good day, Ken.
Yes, good day. And to clarify, I was an environmental engineer. That had been my career up until last year, but that's okay. Any research, might pull that up. But I'm
Once
certainly
an engineer, always an engineer.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Clear.
But my heart is in space. So that's my segue there. My original major was aerospace engineering. Environmental was a detour, and I'm not only on the board of directors with National Space Society and 3 other positions. Also, I'm a space communicator, so it's crucial to me to help the public or general public understand what it is that's happening with regard to space technology, whether it's in the Caribbean, whether it's in the US, in the UK, worldwide. So that is, again, of crucial importance to me. As far as students go and related with respect to the National Space Society, there are, and I have to correct something that I said in a previous situation like this, there are 7 different student contests that the National Space Society conducts each year, each school year, I should say. And therefore, each is for a variety of different age ranges. So in general, anywhere from elementary school through college, there's an opportunity for a student to participate in at least one of these 7 different contests. And these contests range from everything to people living and working in space. That's called space settlement in the future, or whether it's any of, again, space solar power, being able to have large satellites in space that have solar panels that convert solar energy 24 hours a day to a microwave beam and sends that energy to Earth. And this is a technology that does not exist yet, but eventually it will, ideally. And these satellites and the energy they produce would be on the level of power plants. So in areas where electricity may be not as accessible or not as continuous as it should be, this is a technology that would be hopefully an upgrade, hopefully an improvement over that situation. And anyway, I could go on and on. Again, seven different types of contests for students to engage, ideally to engage the students. And someone is asking about how will the financing be addressed. That's an hour-long discussion. So that's the short answer. So there's a lot of different options, lots of different things have been discussed. It would start out as some government activity, and there has to be some agreement between I almost hate to say it these days because NASA's in an awkward budget situation, but historically, since 1968, when the idea was first developed, the idea was, okay, well, will it be NASA or will it be Department of Energy in the United States? And there's been a back and forth debate on that. But in any case, there are people who have ideas for a solution.
That's right. Thanks for that. And it is very much, we always say, is making best use of existing resources, the alliances, the connections, and are we making best use? So I'm going to go over to Dr. Claire. If there aren't any questions, I'll go over to
Miss
Dr.
Simpson is there. Miss Tora Simpson is there from NCU. She joined late, but she's.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Excellent. Tora Simpson. Tora Simpson is a shining example of youth leadership and advocacy. She represents the Northern Caribbean University Space Advocates Club. And with Dr. Claire, I've seen how well she interacts with the students. So welcome, Tora. And,
Good morning.
you certainly are an inspiration to the students. I've seen the evidence personally. So over to you.
All right. Good morning. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning again, colleagues. I just do my best with what I have, as I saw someone post in the chat, to just do your best with the resources that you have. And that's what I have been doing at NCU for the past almost 8 years. So I heard Meredith speaking, and I came in on the point where she was speaking about heart. And heart being the space that we could actually kind of channel this space tech into Jamaica as a viable, way of earning income, etc. And I think this is really a key area that we should actually put some energy into, kind of tunneling into heart and seeing what can be offered there, because they do have a very up-to-date facility in St. Elizabeth that's not far from Mandeville, where I am based. And I've been to that facility. They have mechatronics, they have a light, I can't remember what it's called, but some other electronics, they have robotics. So it's really not far off to just introduce a space concept onto that. And of course, we're up at NCU, the NCU Space Advocates Club. They have been active for the past, about 3 years now. And one of the projects that we have coming up is launching a little satellite center where we can actually kind of map the different satellites in the atmosphere, and hopefully we'll be able to make a launch at some point in the future. But you just have to be thinking futuristic. And I thank Dr. Nelson for actually coming here and just bringing that out. Like Ken, I would have pursued my undergraduate in aerospace engineering at Embry-Riddle in Florida. And I worked in the aerospace industry for a short while, more on the airplane side, but I'm definitely a space enthusiast at heart. And of course, there would be, a bit of back and forth because I'm not a citizen, so I won't get into all of that. But I would have detoured and taken up academia for the past 7 to 8 years, and I have also worked in project management. And those skills have really helped to nurture what we have here at NCU. So we look forward to any kind of collaborations that are happening in Jamaica, expansions of the Space Advocates Club. Our team, they have entered Space Week, a Space Week competition with Max IQ. That's a company in South Africa. Hope I'm not messing up the name, but they entered a competition there and they were able to use these very small electronic modular kits to collect data and learn about their environment and then expand their findings from the research to what could be happening on other planets, what could happen on Mars, how could we live there, so getting them to think in this type of way is very important because that's where the world is going, and it'll allow them to, well, our future generations and even us ourselves should keep thinking of how we can fit in. But it will allow us to all try and find different sectors in the space region that us as the Caribbean can really contribute to.
Excellent. And there's a couple of points that you touched on there, particularly the non-STEM skills, project management, leadership. So I'm going to ask same question to both Dr. Valerie and Meredith before we ask Dr. Claire to give a perspective to close this section. So my question to both of you, and we've touched on it, is the importance of system intervention, the institutional knowledge mobilization. So can you just quickly give us your thoughts on, we are where we are, so we're not going to get into how we got here, but from a transformational leadership, you know, what's the consensus decision making? What are the priorities from where we are now, and then where we then chart the next steps?
The priorities to me would be to continue to foster.
Right. That was to Dr. Claire.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was to Dr. Claire and Meredith. So I'll come back to you because they're going to base it on what you were saying.
Dr. Grant, not me.
Sorry, Dr. Valerie. Dr. Claire's coming in at the end. Sorry, Dr. Valerie,
Okay.
then Meredith, then Tora, and then Dr. Claire.
Right. As you said, we are where we are. And so I think there has to be this recognition that one, this is now our lived reality. We're facing all different kind of challenges. And so by virtue of that, it's urgent. It's not something that can be put off anymore. And so I appreciated leadership that now says, let's not go on gut feelings. Let's look at the scientific data. We have to be doing data-driven approaches to solve the problems that we now face. So for example, in the OECS, I can speak to that there has been that shift, paradigm and mindset. And so everything is underpinned by data. And if we start behaving like that, we recognize that it's not you over here doing something, it's not me over here doing something, but it's an ecosystems approach. And so we have to be working together. We have to be cooperating. We have to be co-creating, and it's everybody's business. And so while it is the political leaders have a part to play in making sure that that framework is there and some of the institutional support and things like that is there, we all equally have parts to play. So academia has a part to play. The private sector have a big role to play, because you know what? Private sector is the one innovating faster. And so oftentimes there's that skepticism. But I also would like to say, we cannot any longer afford for it to be that persons are coming in to save us. There shall not be any solution without us. We need to have the local champions. And even the donor agencies who are playing a big role in this space, they have to start recognizing it. It cannot be that those outside influences, because you do not understand the uniqueness and the nuances that we face. And without understanding that, then you can't fix us. And so the solutions, nothing for us without us, that has to be the kind of mindset shift that happens.
And do we have a plan?
Well, I believe that the plan, I think the plan is information. Right. And we have to get on board, and we have to have more conversations like these. And it shall not be just talk shop, because we talk too much. We need to act. We need to have the plan, but we need to start executing. And I like what Dr. Nelson said earlier. Oftentimes, it's not about the money. We have to be creative. We have to have that vision, and we need to systematically start building on things. I see too often where there has been money, there has been projects, and we discard it and we start over. Why aren't we using those foundations as stepping stone and building on them? And we have to create that mindset shift.
Thank you very much. Going to go to Meredith, then Ken will talk about the broader space outreach into communities, then to then to Tora then.
Thank you,
Go ahead.
Dr. Thank you, Dr. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Valerie, for that, because I totally agree with what you're saying. And it's definitely a paradigm shift where I'm coming from in terms of building the capacity of teachers is how do we co-create with teachers? So teachers should be in the room with industry and university as actual partners doing and understanding the work so that it becomes living and life, a part of their everyday life, so they can now take it into their classrooms and make it relevant for young people. Because curriculum is a living artifact, it's not stagnant. And in order for us to build the capacity of teachers, they need to be part of whatever change is happening. They need to be able to understand what happens in industry and how does what happen in industry impact what we do in our everyday lives. And so I think bringing them in the conversations from the beginning is also important. But I think the bigger piece is really mapping out the vision. What is our vision? And then what are our objectives? And then we come together and then work to execute the objectives so that we can meet our everyday goals, you know? So that's
where do you see the entry point is, though, from a system point of view? Because there has to be an entry point in order for that to take place.
So I feel like the entry point, because I'm a teacher educator, really starts with us working with teachers hand in hand, right? And understanding where they are. Usually when I go into spaces and places where we're asking teachers to implement a curriculum, they're struggling to get the content. And I said, and really focus on pedagogy. But where we really need to start with teachers is bringing them into the room so they're actually learning the content, so they're comfortable and they own the content so they can now go and transform the classroom, right? And so they have to be part of the learner so they can become the teacher. And I think that's when we make change.
Right, so I'm definitely going to Tora next. Tora, apologies. You had the point to make.
Okay, so I agree with Meredith as well. It definitely starts in the classrooms and of course, starting with the teachers, giving them the appropriate skill. So even in Jamaica right now, I've been trying to contact Ministry of Education for months upon months and saying, hey, I can help you guys with the STEM programs that you are trying to fill out throughout the country. And I haven't been getting much feedback. I was sent to I guess a project manager, a coordinator for the STEM program here in Manchester. And the person told me they'll get back to me once they, basically figure out what they're supposed to do. So it just clearly identifies what Meredith is saying, is that we all need to be trained. Teachers, persons in Ministry of Education that are leading the programs, they need to be trained, have the skill to understand how to put the programs together and then embed it into the schools, educate the students, have them go out in the communities and create projects, solve problems using those skills, and then it'll just, ripple on from there.
So hopefully forums such as this will give some solutions to how if you have to do things in an alternative approach, because we're talking about creativity, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and now we add a fifth C, we talk about curious, in order to actually solve that problem. So again, it's I go to Ken now with his space education background.
Rudy,
thoughts on that.
Rudy, before you go on, I would like to just add something to what Tora is saying in terms of working with the government. I really think the lead takes place at the university setting, right? The university takes the lead in terms of training the teachers. I think they take the lead in moving work forward, and then the government now adapts what the university puts in place. I think that's a good way, and processing system for us to really make that change.
Absolutely. So we're back to that institutional knowledge mobilization, which is really important. Valerie, you got your hand up?
I sometimes we think that a lot of things happen through formal curriculum, and while that has its place, I need us to always remember that the world is our learning lab, and so those coincidental learning that takes place are certainly critical and sometimes even more important. And so we want to make sure that we create that space outside of formal settings to make sure that that can happen. So that should never be underestimated. So we have to find ways to make sure that that's a big part of the conversation.
Absolutely. We always say technology has no gatekeepers. And if there's a gatekeeper, there's probably no fence around it. So, you know, we shouldn't be deterred if we're focused on the mission and the objective. So Ken, then I hand back to Dr. Claire, then we'll finish our session.
Sure. Thank you. And I would like to thank Dr. Valerie for giving me the perfect segue into what I was about to say. I mentioned earlier, I majored in aerospace engineering. That was my original major, but my passion for space began when I was 8 years old. It began from, of all things, watching Star Trek, the original series. I'm old school. So the thing is, as Dr. Valerie was saying, it's about, you know, there's so many options for getting information. I mean, obviously, anyone, anywhere in the world can do a Google search or Bing search or what have you. But there's also the National Space Society. And please do not be misled by the term national. It's not limited to the US. It's an international organization. It always has been. So this organization, in addition to, I already mentioned, the 7 different types of student contests, all related to different aspects of space technology. There's also a library that's online, a space library, where anyone can access papers written not just recently, but also through the decades. Think of it as historical knowledge about everything from space settlement to space junk. That's an informal term, but orbital debris. That's certainly an issue that many people are aware of. To mining asteroids and things like that that might sound like science fiction, but they will happen sooner than many people would expect. So there's that online excuse me, laboratory that anyone can access, even if you're not a member. However, if a person decides to become a member, this could be teachers, this could be students, this could be anyone. If you decide to become a member of National Space Society, there's a quarterly magazine with several articles each month, each quarter, each issue that are what I call the latest information in space travel and ideas that a variety of different experts have about what is being done and what's being projected to happen, whether it's during the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So there's that. There's online newsletters that come out essentially bi-weekly for members, 2 different newsletters. One newsletter for new members for your first year, and then there's another for ongoing members. So there's so much information that's available, of course, with any topic, but just I guess, a plug for National Space Society. I consider this, in my 15 years as a member now, to be an excellent source of information. And I didn't even mention the annual conference. It just happens to be coming up starting 2 weeks from today, this year in Orlando, Florida, USA. So there will be, right now, there's at least 10 people who have been to space who will be featured speakers, NASA astronauts as well as space tourists. And over 100 speakers in general, perhaps 1,000 attendees. And this happens every year in a different metro area in North America every year. And again, so many different sources of information. But personally,
Right.
I put National Space Society as on the top of the list, and no, I'm not a paid speaker for them.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Rudy,
Have we
and
got any more time?
no, clearly we need to keep this exciting
Yeah, just wanted
conversation
Dr.
going,
Claire
but
just to
we need
give
to
a
wrap this
quick,
session.
yeah. Over to you, Dr. Claire. You're on mute.
All right, thank you so much. I think, as I said in Jamaica, the place turn up. Yeah, people are excited. I just dropped in the chat. We have a showcase space for the Caribbean Space Society. I already have been in discussions with the National Space Society about setting up a membership. So anybody who becomes a member of the Caribbean Space Society, we're going to join as an organization to reduce the costs of, many people in the Caribbean can't afford a foreign exchange, and people in Africa as well. So one of my unofficial jobs that I've taken on as a member of the National Space Society is trying to make sure that one of the competitions, if not next year, certainly the year after, I have been blown away by the presentations, because the papers that are presented by the kids from India and China, and I think some of them from Estonia, some other places, I sit around and I go like, and these kids, some of them, they can barely see over the podium, okay? So this is serious stuff, and I think we have that same talent across the Caribbean region. So we are going to make it happen, and I'm giving myself 24 months at least, if not next year, for sure, 2027, we will have a delegation of students from the Caribbean at the National Space Society Conference presenting their research papers. All right. With that, we're going to go into the last what happens next, and I'm excited to be joined by many of the people I've been working with across the years. I'm going to begin with Dr. Srimati Kisan, who is on the call, because she's calling from furthest away, and she's past her bedtime. She's all the way in Chennai, India, where I spent a couple weeks partnering and networking with people in universities in India, trying to create new relationships so that we can benefit. And we're going to be also joined from Nigeria, Alma Okpalefe, who is Executive Director of World Space Week. And all this is about telling us what can happen, what's on offer. We don't have to wait until we have Boko money. Yes, we'll get there. We have to start with a vision. And the vision is there are small spaces of entry. So let me begin by introducing my friend and colleague, Dr. Srimati Kisan. I serve as an advisor to the Shaktisat mission. Dr. Kisan, could you just tell them about Mission Shaktisat? Make it brief. We're going to run through everybody in the next 25 minutes. Everybody has 3 minutes to make your statement about what do you have to offer the Caribbean.
I will do that. Thank you so much, Dr. Claire. And it's wonderful to see so many friends of me. Dr. Sani, how are you? Oh my God, Alma, love you. So nice. Thank you for bringing everybody together. And I'm so glad to see so many women representing here. So that's another, I think glorious special moment for all of us. Well, Shakti Sat, I think I will, I was listening to your previous panel, and I think I will pick a few words from there. What is it that we're going to be doing? Are we going to be waiting till the government says yes to it? And are we, waiting for the government? So I picked that, and I would say that we at Mission Shakti Sat are not waiting for any governments. We want to create a movement, a scientific movement, especially in the space industry. Why would only a few countries lead? Why is it that we have to listen to only the few countries? So if we are able to create that awareness to the next generation, and especially women, why girls? Everybody asks me this question, why do you want to only pick girls? I think girls are more empathetic. They have something within them that would say no wars, no ego. We are able to pass love. And I think in space, we need a lot of collaborations, no competition. And we need to empathize with people who are not having this facility. At least in India, we're blessed to have facilities that could escalate our thought processes and, enhance our talents. So that's the reason Mission Shakti Sat, 108 countries holding hands with each other, 108 girls from each country, which means 12,000 girls from high school will be educated with the nuances of satellite technology, space, and then one child from each country will be handpicked and brought to India to build a payload to the moon. Now, why moon? Because we've already done low Earth orbits. We've done, about 27 space missions, out of which 5 orbital missions. And in that, we had one which is very close to my heart, having 750 rural girls of India. Today, the impact is so high that these children who were to get married are having conversation with their parents, telling them, give us an opportunity. We will perform. We are going to be scientists. We are going to be fighter pilots. I mean, these were terminologies which were never there before. So this little information that we could give to the children, bring them together to build a satellite, and today they are doing wonders. So why keep this within India? The entire world is one family, is what we believe. One earth, one family. So when that is there, bring in all the countries together, share the curriculum with everybody. Let every child get an opportunity to learn. Then, whomsoever is excited and, want to get into this industry will get into this industry. So that's the whole idea of Mission Shakti Sat. And I'm here having all my supporters, my advisors, and my sisters here who are supporting from each of the countries. And grace of God, we've got about 102 countries now, so 6 more to go. But already 6,000 children have started, going through the curriculum, taking up the activities, and are super thrilled to be here in India next year. So Mission Shakti Sat is powered, girl powered. So that is.
So
thank you, Dr. Claire, for this opportunity.
Dominic Campbell is the representative for Jamaica. So Dominic, you want to bring us up to speed as to how are we doing in onboarding our girls in Jamaica? And by the way, we need to get Guyana on board. I think Professor has gone, but I'd love to get Guyana on board and Barbados on board. We already have Trinidad and Tobago. They're moving very fast. Trinidad and Tobago has already, I think,
oh, they're doing wonderful, Dr. Claire. They just blown up the country.
They're blown up. We have St. Kitts, Grenada, and St. Lucia, but we definitely would like to have Guyana and Barbados on board. So, Miss Campbell, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Please forgive me if my internet drops. I've noticed that it's been dropping throughout the call. Now, for us in Jamaica, we actually have 20 excited girls. I know 20 is not compared to the 108 that we really originally planned for, but the timing right now, it's very crucial for the girls to actually be focusing on their CSEC and CAPE exams. But after that, the girls have expressed to me that they're interested and they will pull a string. So I'm looking forward to that. And we still have until about October, November to really get, well, that's a cutoff for the curriculum to end, but we still have a good period to work with. So summer, I'm definitely looking to get more engagement from the girls. As far as it goes with the interest, I've seen where people have expressed that they've had that interest and they're more looking forward to other opportunities that they can express and funnel this into. So I think with Dr. Kesan introducing this to us, and if we being an ambassador for it.
Okay, you're frozen now.
Maybe this is something I would want to go into. This is something that I could see myself doing as a young person living in Jamaica. So I really appreciate the efforts that Dr. Kesan and Dr. Nelson, because Dr. Nelson is the one that wrote me into all of this. I really appreciate the efforts, and I'm sure that there are couple of other people that also appreciate the efforts right now. But that is my
Yeah,
just
absolutely. Effort of all my
my little
sisters
updates as
across
to where
the
the
globe.
mission is in right now.
Yes, I'm going to run over to Jay Shaw. Jay Shaw is with the National Society of Black Engineers. One of the things we want to do in the Caribbean, we want to institutionalize these things. We don't want after the coursework is done, the girls scatter and have nowhere to go. And so National Society of Black Engineers, I'm sure it's Jay's, I'm not seeing his picture, so if I don't see his picture on, I'm going to move to Mariam since she's on. If Jay is on, please turn on your camera so I know you're there so you can speak. So Jay Shaw is National Society of Black Engineers, and they have a Caribbean special interest group, and they're really interested in ensuring the institutionalization of things. We got to get these clubs started in the schools. So Jay, what can National Society of Black Engineers Aerospace Special Interest Group offer our high schoolers? So once they've done with Shaktisat, how do we keep them moving forward?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Well, at least it's afternoon my time. NSB offers networking. NSB offers collaboration. NSB offers many times students, I know when I went through NSB, when I went through college, even before college in high school, I'll try to make this as brief as possible. But many times you're interested in STEM, you're interested in going to the next level, becoming an engineer, getting involved in space, getting involved in aerospace, aero meaning aviation, space meaning space, and the combination meaning aerospace. Many times we have found, although the climate is changing, we've found or we find ourselves where we feel isolated because we are the brains of the institution or the brains of the organization or within our community. And so NSB offers that next step at the university level, progressing further some of the programming, some of the, I say the future involvement, meaning post, especially the aerospace special interest group, technical involvement post, I say university. Many of, within the space, the NSB Aerospace Special Interest Group, we're, like you were noting, Dr. Nelson, we are writing papers at the PhD level. We're conducting research. We're bringing together minds from various different cultures. Although our concentration for aerospace in the Caribbean is in the Caribbean, the Special Interest Group is a bigger umbrella and is more global. And people are collaborating together to be able to tackle some of the tasks and the problems that we're facing. So in a nutshell, NSB offers the opportunity for us to not be alone in the system and possibly further providing proper collaboration to be able to, I think it was Rudy Page, I believe that's his name, said we need to start taking a systems focus at the problems that we're trying to solve. We do need to collaboration. Dr. Grant, you mentioned that so much in your in the things that you've said so far. We do need to make this a part of everyday life. Dr. Meredith Smart, I think you mentioned that in your presentation. And there's so many more things that we do need to collaborate. Well, this is a possibility. It is a possibility, and it all depends on how we decide to use it. The possibility of collaborating, the possibility of organizing, the possibility of start taking that systems approach to solving many of the problems. I hear people, especially at the beginning of this, we said, oh, the Caribbean, where we may not be, something along the lines of not developing our own space program. I mean, aerospace, the world that we know is becoming so much smaller. Boom Aerospace just made their inaugural flight for their, I'll try to make this short, but they just made their inaugural flight for their sort of supersonic human flight. This is getting, or the sun is what I like to call it, of the Concorde. Where are we going with that? The world is being connected. That means, let me finish that thought first. Any 2 points on the air on the planet in under 90 minutes. So what does that mean for the Caribbean? The Caribbean is close to the equator. Any launches into space is usually preferable to be closer to the equator. So business opportunity. And we think about tourism, we think about launches, we think about New York to, I'm just gonna pick an island, Jamaica, just for fun. New York to Jamaica in 20 minutes. Get on a space shuttle, maybe a day layover, get on a space shuttle. And this means for materials, this means for human capital, for whatever it is that we're trying to get into space for. Now, all of a sudden, it's not a very long time. So out of the vision, back into the mission. So NSBE provides the possibility for these types of correlations, not only for space, also for the aero, the aviation. And we do know that many of our technologies that we use today do come from space and aerospace related investments. All right, even the car you drive, the cell phone you use, and so much more. So just to touch on a little bit, we can definitely have another discussion about this. Dr. Claire and I have had several discussions about things like this. It's good. We do need leadership, and leadership means a lot. One more point. Sorry, Dr. Nelson, I'm going to take this just a few seconds. One of the things I think Professor Mohammed Martin mentioned this is change. I feel we do need to start changing the way our students view technology. Believe it or not, I was at a high school in Jamaica, and I think it was one of the football games came on, and people are so excited the school gave out half day. But whenever there's something for technical, there just doesn't seem to be any time for it. We have to change. We have to put this in make it a part of everyday life. As Dr. Meredith Smart said, we do need to make this where it is part of our social media go-to or our social media. People are excited about hearing about technical fields and aerospace.
Well, as I said, NSBE has also NSBE Junior. So for people like Rudy Page and Dr. Smart and the Shaktis Mission, we want to make sure that those girls' schools and those schools we're working with, we're also reaching out to the Girl Guides Association, because that will allow us to get into the co-ed schools from the back end. And the idea is trying to bring on Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts as another way, because they have to earn space badges. So we have, again, using what we have without having to have more money. So with that, let me move to Dr. Mariam Sani, who is in the UK, but also sits on the board of the Space Prize Foundation. What does Space Prize Foundation have that we can borrow? I won't say beg, because we're not begging, and we're not stealing. So we're just borrowing.
You don't need to borrow, you can have.
All right.
Thank you so much for inviting me. In fact, it was a busy day for me, so I started listening and thought I was going to drop off. I've actually been on the whole time because it's been so fantastic. And I've just stopped myself from jumping in every time somebody says something that I just think is amazing. Tora Simpson, Meredith Beckford, we have to be in touch, as Rudy as well. I mean, I know as a group we will continue because this is so important. The most important thing is the intention, to do everything intentionally, as Dr. Valerie Grant said. I'm not a space specialist, I'm a STEMinist. Okay, so I'm a chemist by background, a chemist who was just the only girl doing A-level chemistry in my year. I did it because I liked it. I continued and then realized I became a teacher. I've done many things, but basically the idea of young people not getting into something which they can do because they haven't been given the opportunities is what sits with me. And so that's what I've made sort of my life mission. And through that and do my research, so I have a PhD in STEM education and careers. And it was a focus on girls in Saudi Arabia. This is not about that today, but basically just like people were saying, oh, you know, we take from other places that we think we can't do. People were of the impression that they couldn't do, and I needed to prove them wrong. So I showed that there is no underrepresentation of girls in STEM education in Saudi Arabia, which is not what the West was saying. Now, what what I do at the Space Prize Foundation is I'm their education lead. We have a curriculum which is for free. I'll rephrase that. We have a curriculum resources which are free. It's a book, it's online, it has 8 modules. And the idea of this was it can stand alone so students could use it on their own, or it can be adapted so that schools incorporate it into their, whether after school clubs or if the ministries allow, extend their education offering beyond grade 6. Because in most places, even in the UK, after about grade 5, grade 6, there's nothing which is directly teaching the children about space. So the first module is called Why Space? And I think that that is something that everyone should read, not just children, because a lot of the times as it's been said, we're using the technology, we're using things which come out of space missions, and without realizing, even something like the Nike shoe, you know, the computer mouse pad, all of these things and more. And they're detailed in the book, are things which children ought to know, people ought to know, that these are how they are already interacting with space. But the second chapter is called Skill Sets and Mindsets. And as has just been said, there has to be a mindset shift, Why? Why is it important? Why? How can they get involved? And it shouldn't just be something which is taught. It should be very much interactive. So I'll just run through what the other chapters are, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about Space Prize. So Introduction to Space Science, History of Space Exploration, the New Space Economy, Space and Sustainability, Space Governance and Ethics, and Future Implications. So space law, space ethics, business. Space isn't just about aerospace. It's not just about, you know, the astronauts. I've met many astronauts. I've spoken with them. We've done projects together. My last project was actually in New York, where we had around 38 girls from New York, New Jersey, Colombia, UK, Saudi Arabia, came together to do a CubeSat challenge. And that was 3 days at the Intrepid Museum. All of our competitions are free, right? All of our competitions are free. As long as the student can get to where it should be, they're free. And we do competitions in different countries. So there's been 2 in the US, 1 in Portugal. We're planning 1 now for Saudi Arabia, 2 now for Saudi Arabia. And as much as we started off focusing on girls, we will do competitions where, in addition to doing a competition for girls, we'll do a competition for boys. The competitions are not super challenging, they're not technical, they're usually essay competitions, because our aim is to get children to say what they think, what they like, what they would like to know more, or how they see the future of space, so that it's not a difficult contest, but the outcome, if they attend one of the space camps, is amazing. Just to quote, yesterday I was on a call with someone from EOS, the magazine, and I was telling her that one of the students has said, I'm not really interested in space, just thought it was something good to do. But I was blown away by the actual opportunity, and I can't believe that there is so much out there that we can do, which is related to the space industry. I wanted to be a pediatric doctor, and I still want to, but I can see how I can do so much more around that linked with space. So there's a lot that we can offer. Like I say, the curriculum is free online. We do mentoring for the students after they've participated. We try our best to get schools involved, parents involved, but honestly, it's so difficult, because as much as we are trying, even with Mission Shakithat, I'm talking about now in the UK, we have the UK Space Agency, advertise and so on, but people are afraid. The children are afraid. You can't mention it to them once and leave them. You've got to keep on, and look at their skills. If somebody's a good speaker, if somebody's good at putting Lego together, whatever it is, the skill that they have, you need to show them how that can be utilized in the industry, because that's when they start to believe that there is a role for them. Even as much as design, you know, the mission patches, the space suits, you know, these kind of things. So they need to know that it's not all about tech. It's about what skills do you have, and let's see how we can fit those in. Have I gone over my time? Okay.
Yes, you have.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're going to bring it home with Alma Okpalefe, the Executive Director of the World Space Week Association, and my co-chair for Space Ungana 2025, which will take place in Abuja, July 19th to 26th. We are hard at work trying to create, build out the ecosystem in Nigeria. Why Nigeria? Because Nigeria is not only the most populous country in Africa, it's also a signatory to the Artemis Accords. So we want to make sure that we have a pathway to be involved in the Artemis Accords, because after all, if we're able to create a relationship between UTech and Cosmopolitan University, who will be our host, we're going to be able to maybe do some joint research that may one day make it to the moon. So with that, Alma Okpalefe, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to the organizers for having me. And it's great to see a few members of the Shakti Sat family here. I'm just going to give you a brief background as to what we do at World Space Week Association. I like to assume everybody knows about World Space Week, as they should, but I accept that it's not. That might not be the case. So World Space Week is a UN-declared celebration of space, and it holds between the 4th and the 10th of October every year, celebrated globally in any form that is contextually relevant to the celebrant. So that's what makes World Space Week such a dynamic platform, simply because it is inclusive. There are actually no barriers to entry. I think the only barrier to entry is perhaps your imagination. Every year we have a theme just to rein in the celebrations, or else it might go a bit overboard. So for instance, last year we did space and climate change. We've done women in space. We've done space sustainability. And this year we're doing living in space, which is why it ties in very nicely with the Space in Ghana that Dr. Claire spoke about, which is going to hold in Abuja this year. So World Space Week has been celebrated for the past 25 years, 26 this year, but the organization which I lead, which coordinates the celebration, has been in existence for 40 odd years. So when we think of its benefits, the benefits of participating in World Space Week, especially as an emerging space country or region, I have to say World Space Week is incredibly dynamic. Our mission really, if I was to put it in a sentence, is to be that bridge between space and society. And how do we do that? Through awareness. Now, there's something that Dr. Valerie said that really resonated with me, which is about intentionality in our approach to entry into space and growing within the space sector. Now, I'm not a product of intentionality. In fact, I'm supposed to be somewhere in the Niger Delta doing oil and gas law, not discussing space in the Caribbean. And that's because I'm Nigerian. That's what we do, oil and gas. So there were no visible pathways at the time I was in uni, and even before, into the space sector. But World Space Week as a platform tries to address that by having that synchronized global celebration that places the global spotlight on space globally, but also at a national or individual organizational level, also amplifies the effects, the achievements, and what is going on in the space sector. And we've seen that as a result, a lot of these celebrations precede the initiation or the development of space agencies. We've seen this happen in South Africa. We've seen it happen in Zimbabwe and in other places that actually started their space journey through the government after continuous World Space Week celebrations that were put together by ordinary individuals and organizations outside of government. So I'm really looking to you, Dr. Claire, to galvanize the Caribbean region towards, collective and individual celebrations of World Space Week, to gather that momentum and actually use it as a force to drive the sort of space agenda that you desire, whether it be collectively as a region or as individual states or even organizations or space enthusiasts within this particular region. So that's World Space Week in a nutshell. I hope I stuck with my 3 minutes.
Yes, you did. Now, folks, we've come to the end of a wonderful afternoon. I'm just so excited. I have to say, if anything good came out of COVID, it's the networks we made when we were locked inside. Dr. Richard Damore wasn't able to make it. He's at Morgan State University. That is where I have my first teeny weeny, I would call it a nano lab, because it's just like 2 pieces of equipment. But I'm very grateful to him for having welcomed me and allowed the university to give us a starting point, having a nano lab at Morgan State University and a fledgling space lab. I want to also thank the team at UTech and specifically President Kevin Brown, who I had no idea was an aerospace guy behind the scenes. And so when I reached out, it was just a matter of saying, okay, I'm going to try again. They ghosted me the last time, but maybe this time I'll be lucky. And I think I hit pay dirt, and I'm so excited to see that 7 years after starting this journey, things are coming together. As an advisor, a global advisor for mission ShaktiSat, it being a mission to the moon, it's very, very almost like spiritual, because my first entry into space was really about the SDGs. It was really about creating a planetary consciousness. Moon runnings, the life and times of the first Jamaican on the moon, where I envisaged a people's village run by people, including Jamaicans who travel to space on the Nigerian shuttle. So now I'm telling Alma's laughing at me. I'm saying, I don't care what you all doing, but when I finish with you Nigerians, you're going to build a shuttle, because Jamaica can't afford to build no shuttle. So we coming up on it. But now that Guyana has found oil, I might have to drag Guyana into the mix, because they can put some of the money. And all these oil producing countries in Africa have to do better. So our job as civil society and as space advocates is to ensure that we pull, push, and prod the leaders in government and the leaders in the private sector, who certainly have money to buy private jets, into a different paradigm of how they see their possibility. And I think that with a team like this in the room, we have all the tools we need. As I say, when people ask me where's the money, I get very annoyed and I tend to get very short-tempered. Let us start with a vision first. I know that we need to have money. It is clear we need to have money. But our national anthem, the most, and I'm going to be very prejudiced here, I don't care, the most beautiful national anthem in the world is the Jamaican national anthem. And the line goes, give us vision lest we perish.
Yeah, that's right.
Teach us true respect for all. Stir response to duty's call. So everything we need as Jamaicans and is in our national anthem and in our national pledge, which says we Jamaicans are to go out and become servants to ensure the prosperity of the whole human race. There is no other national pledge in the world where children are saying every day their duty is to become the leaders of the whole human race. So Jamaica, let us step up to the plate. We have what it takes. We have friends. We have people from Mauritius, from UK, from Canada, from US, from India, from Nigeria, from Kenya, from Ghana, waiting in the wings for us to get this moving. And I do believe that this opportunity, thank you so much, Dr. Rowe, for being the trooper to bring the team together, and Michelle Beckford, our going to be our mouthpiece in Jamaica to defend when you're attacked. I know you didn't have to defend it, so that's okay. But I know that as a Beckford, part of the Beckford clan, I'm married to a Beckford, by the way, we are going to make sure that we get this done. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to turn the floor over to Michelle Beckford to give the official and formal closeout. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. We have caught the vision, we have caught the energy, and you have given us our marching orders, the call to action. So the conversation must continue. But as we come to the end of our symposium, I want to give Dr. Rowe the opportunity to deliver some very brief closing remarks.
Indeed,
Dr. Rowe.
brief. Indeed, very brief. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again. I listened to Dr. Nelson's call to action. I was like, I'm general there. And so, sir, literally in listening to all the conversation, we realized that this could have continued on and on and on. In fact, any one of the plenary sessions could have been the session for today that we spent 3 hours discussing. But nonetheless, I would like at this time, as we close the event, to thank everyone for their participation. I express my heartfelt thanks to our speakers, moderators, organizers, and the participants who have truly made this event meaningful, having listened to the exchange and the communication and the information that was shared. Very meaningful. Special thanks to our keynote speaker, Dr. Nelson. Special thanks as well to the Master of Ceremonies, Mrs. Michelle Beckford, as well as special thanks to the organizing team who have been working tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that things flow, and for the past few weeks have been working to ensure that this event ran smoothly today. Now, today we set out to explore how the Caribbean can advance its space agenda. And we leave somewhat inspired, especially with the final speech here by Dr. Nelson, and also informed and in some ways connected, as I noticed various people sharing their LinkedIn information as a way to continue the engagement. And certainly the expectation is that we will continue to engage. We have seen that the future of space is not far off, and it is here, it is now, and it is ours to shape. And we have been making use of the technology, but there's far more which can be done and much more opportunities that remain to be explored, whether through innovation in education, applications in climate science, or the dreams of our young space advocates. Today has shown that the Caribbean has both talent and the will to take its place in the global space conversation. And so let us leave here committed, not just to the vision, but to collaboration, investment, and action. The space agenda is not a distant ideal. It is a present opportunity, and the Caribbean must be ready to take bold steps forward. I thank you for your engagement and your presence. Let today be more than a discussion, and let it be a call to action. The Caribbean role in the global space ecosystem must be pursued with intentionality, unity, and courage. And this is something that we have heard echoed through the various sharing of individuals. So let us keep building, let us keep dreaming, and above all, let us keep reaching beyond the boundaries and beyond the skies. Thank you and safe travels, whether you're wherever your orbit takes you next. Thank you very much for participating. I look forward to engaging with you at some other time on the way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rowe. Indeed, many new ideas and meaningful collaborations have been sparked. So it leaves me just to say, do have a wonderful day. Thanks to all who stayed online for the duration of our half-day symposium. And we look forward to continuing this very important dialogue as we work together in advancing a Caribbean space agenda. Thank you all.
Thank you.